Hello everyone. I am your dark narrator here to guide you today. I know many of you use this video to help you drift off to sleep, but before you do, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also drop a comment letting us know where you're from and what time you're watching. Now settle in, get comfortable, and relax. My wife Lynn and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I noticed any weird behaviors or red flags. I can't stress enough how out of character this whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful. She's always been the no-nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it through half of the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea, and that's fine. But that's what was so strange about this. It's just so unlike her. I should also add that she never had any mental health issues, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together, I think I'd have seen some sort of sign. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning and knew I wouldn't be able to make it to Dunkin' Donuts for my usual morning fix. I took a sip of my coffee as I hurried down the hall towards the front door, when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner ahead of me. I could only see her eyes, and a strand of her long dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. I did burn the shit out of my lips. "Geez, Lynn," I said, wiping a few drops of coffee from my pants. "You scared the shit out of me." She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry off towards the living room, and by the time I got to the front door, she was out of sight. It was really weird and just totally out of character for her, like I said. But I also found it kind of funny that she was being more playful and a little less serious. I shouted that I loved her and called her a weirdo. As I shut the door behind me, I heard her laughing. Her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call a priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and by the time I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up, and neither did she, and life went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 a.m., and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing at the kitchen island, jug of OJ in hand, when I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor and saw my wife's smiling face staring back. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with wide, unblinking eyes and grinning like the Cheshire Cat. I screamed. I'll admit it. Not out of irritation, but fear. For some reason, at that moment, I was scared. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards out of my view, her hands and feet smacking the tile floor as she hurried out of the kitchen on all fours. I didn't run after her or even yell after her. I just stood there frozen in shock, wondering what fuck had possessed her to do that. It took me a little longer than I'd like to admit to go back upstairs, but I eventually did. When I got to our bedroom, Lynn was lying on her side, asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathing to be sure she really was asleep. I had the feeling she might jump out at me the moment I got into bed, but she didn't. I climbed into bed and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep, and I was starting to wonder if I dreamt the whole thing. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her cheek, I decided to ask her about it. "What was that about last night?" I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. "You were peeking at me again. From over there," I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help but join her. "You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that," I said. She giggled and set her cup on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. "You creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even," she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds her hands made on the floor as she crawled away. I told myself she was just trying to be silly, just trying to join me in my love of all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her. but it still didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch or living room curtains. Once she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. I might not have even known she was there at all, had the trunk's old hinges not given her away. She'd had the lid propped up just enough so that only half of her face peeked through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth was she doing this. She didn't answer, but she had slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away, feeling disturbed. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I just hoped she would tire of the game quickly. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with her weird prank, and I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I jokingly said that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately, and that she must have given up on her spy game. She looked up at me with a small smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking and I just hadn't noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching from around the corner or behind a door. I was jumpy whenever I was home and she wasn't in full view of me. I felt stupid and a little crazy, but after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture and walls and told myself it was just a bad memory. Then a few days ago, things got so much worse. Lynn left to go to a friend's, and I lounged on the couch and played a couple games on my laptop. Around 9 p.m., I hopped in the shower, and as I was washing the soap from my hair, I felt that awful feeling that I was being watched. I slowly opened my eyes and almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain, her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside. Her long dark hair hung against the curtain, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth hung open in a terrible grin, eyes wide and red, as if she hadn't blinked in a while. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She didn't move, nor did her smile waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was fucking terrified. We stood like that for a few moments, neither of us saying a word. Finally, after what felt like forever, she slowly pulled her head back out of the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards towards the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you. But joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with the crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced in my bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly I heard a muffled sound, and I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, straining to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel scared in my own house, and made to hide in the bathroom for an hour. All for what? Some joke? If it was a joke, it was an awful one. "What the fuck, Lynn?" I snapped. "This shit is getting really fucking annoying." I waited for her to apologize or to call me a jerk, but instead I heard a faint moan, so quiet I wondered if I heard it at all, and then complete silence. "Lynn?" I called out, not able to even hide the shakiness in my voice. I got no response, just my own heavy breathing. "I swear to God, just fucking stop it," I yelled, pounding my fist on the door. I waited for her to cuss me out, something I would expect from me talking to her like that. I never screamed at her before, but there was nothing. Just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared, too afraid to open the damn door and face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which feels like a fucking lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to spend the night hiding in my bathroom, so I got down on my knees and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy about that or not. I looked for a few minutes, waiting to see her head pop up over the top step, but it never came. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door, and mentally prepared myself to open it. I slowly turned the lock with shaky fingers and was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me feel nauseous when I think about it. A moan, louder than before. but this time I was able to tell just where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door as if in slow motion, and locked eyes with my wife, who was peeking out at me from the slight gap. Her eyes were still wide as ever, and her mouth was hanging open in the most grotesque, gaping smile I'd ever seen. I didn't even scream. I was too scared for even that. Her hands were clasped to her chest, body trembling with sheer delight, as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short, raspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open and ran as fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and phone from the table in the living room before running outside to my car. I could hear her shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't hear her getting closer. I didn't bother shutting the front door. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time, either from fear or the cold. Maybe a little of both. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every call and text I got. I didn't check my phone until I was safely parked in my brother's driveway. Lynn had called 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, all wondering where I'd gone and why I left like that. I threw my phone at the dash in a rage, furious at her nonchalant attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in just a pair of boxers, but told me to stay as long as I needed. Chris lent me some clothes and asked me what happened. I told him Lynn and I had a fight, but didn't get into the details. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank even if it was a strange one. I mean, hadn't I encouraged her for years to lighten up instead of being so serious all the time? I had wanted her to relax and loosen up, but this was definitely not what I'd had in mind. I tried to sleep on their sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from inside the closet. Knowing she'd been in there with me the entire time made my skin crawl. She'd never left the fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chris ended up giving me a sleeping pill, so I was able to get a little rest. My sleep was filled with terrible dreams, all of Lynn's smiling face. I woke up just as the sun started to rise. My sore body ached from the sofa and I felt drained. I knew I'd have to call Lynn at some point, but I didn't know what to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word she'd never do any more creepy shit. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious self never looked so good to me. I was contemplating calling her and telling her that, when that familiar feeling came over me. I was being watched. I was staring at the ceiling, my heart in my throat. I didn't want to look away, but the longer I ignored the feeling, the worse it got. My eyes drifted away from the ceiling almost on their own. Her face was pressed up against the window beside the couch, staring down at me with that same gaping smile. Drool dribbled down her lips, leaving 2 long streaks down the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something told me she'd been there quite a while, possibly all night. I didn't bother screaming, though I was afraid anger trumped any fear I felt at that moment. I jumped up from the couch and pounded my palm against the glass. "Lynn, are you crazy? What the hell is wrong with you? Just go home," I shouted. "Now." She didn't move, and her ghastly expression never changed. If anything, her smile only grew, as if she had never been more elated. I could hear Chris and his wife moving around upstairs, as if Lynn could hear them from her place outside. Her head twitched slightly in their direction, and she began to close her mouth slowly. Chris called my name from upstairs, obviously concerned. I turned to see him and his wife, Rebecca, hurrying down the steps. When I turned back to the window, Lynn was gone. The only sign she'd been there at all was the 2 streaks of drool still dripping down the glass. I tried explaining to Chris and Rebecca about waking up to see Lynn watching me through their window. They were skeptical. Who wouldn't be? Chris and I went outside to the spot in front of the window, but there were no footprints in the dirt, just a slight indent. Animal, probably, Chris guessed. And I didn't argue. He and Rebecca assumed I dreamt the entire episode, but they didn't understand, and I was too tired to explain it to them. I called out of work that day and turned my cell off. I didn't want to face Lynn. Just talking to her was too much for me at that point. I really started to believe something was irreversibly wrong with her, that no matter what promises she made, we'd never be the same again. The thought saddened me to my core. I cried most of the morning. By noon, I figured I was ready to confront her. Give her one last chance to explain herself. I could at least give her that after 6 years, I told myself. I turned my phone on and saw the dozens of texts she'd sent, all from a seemingly concerned wife. Can we talk? I love you. Please call me. I'm really worried. Can you answer? Just come home. And more of the same. All texts telling me she loved me and she wanted me home. How worried she was. Not a damn one addressing the crazy shit she pulled. Like she hadn't been acting like a character from a Stephen King book. Even her texts were different. She normally texted novels just to tell me to pick up a loaf of bread. You'd think she'd have more to say to me after her bizarre shenanigans. I know it probably seems childish to some of you who are miles away from this situation. But if you saw the way Lynn had looked at me, how she scampered away on all fours like some wild animal, grinning at me from inside the closet like a lunatic, then I think you'd find my reaction was warranted. I ended up staying with Chris and Rebecca for another night. I didn't wake up yesterday until afternoon, and thankfully I didn't see Lynn's face watching me through the window. I don't want to pry because it's not my place, but is this fight something that can be mended? Rebecca asked. She'd made us both a sandwich for lunch, and I knew she wanted to breach the subject without seeming to be nosy. I don't know, she's like a different person, I said, choosing my words carefully. I still wasn't ready for her or Chris to know the full extent of the batshit craziness I had been dealing with. People change, Ben, but she's still the same woman you married. Maybe you both just need to talk through your issues. Whatever's going on, I'm sure it can be fixed, she said, ever the peacemaker. I think it's beyond that now. I don't think talking would help. I just don't trust her, I said. The words stung in my heart. I missed and loved my wife, but how could I live with someone like that? Living in constant fear didn't sound too appealing. Lynn loves you. She has to be absolutely crushed, she said. I don't know about that, I said. Well, she certainly seemed like it to me. I've never seen her so upset. Very much unlike the Lynn I know. Rebecca said, shaking her head sadly. It took a full minute for her words to really sink in, and when they did, I felt dread worming its way through my skin. Wait, what do you mean? You saw her? You saw Lynn? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Rebecca nodded casually as if that fact wasn't nightmare fuel. Maybe for her it wasn't. She stopped by this morning just after Chris left for work, she said, cleaning the plates from the table. I didn't see her car, though. Maybe she took an Uber or something. Beck, what did she say? Did she come inside? I asked, sweat starting to break out on my forehead. I began looking around, examining corners as though a predator lurked behind them. Number. She just asked if you were awake yet, and I said that you weren't. I asked if she wanted me to wake you, but she said no. Just said to let you sleep, she said as she washed the dishes. That's all? She didn't say anything else? I asked. Number, she looked awful, though. Like she hadn't slept in days. I think you should call her. I got up from the table and thanked Rebecca for lunch. I felt a little bit better at the knowledge that at least she hadn't come inside. Still, I needed to double-check that the doors were locked. I sat for a while trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to go home, but I felt that I owed it to Lynn to help her if I could. Hadn't I swore an oath to love and honor her through sickness and in health? Clearly, she was very sick. If she was sick, which I truly believe she was, I had to try and get her the help she needed. But I didn't even know where to start. I didn't want to call the police, and besides, what the hell was I going to tell them? That my wife was peeking at me? That she was being creepy? As bizarre as she'd been, she still hadn't committed any crime. Not yet, anyway. The police would have probably said that I was overreacting. But this wasn't some prank. It felt wrong. Dangerous, even. Like something sinister lurked beneath her smile. I knew as her husband I was well within my rights to have her committed. But what if she simply acted normal in their presence? She'd obviously been able to fool Rebecca into thinking she was just a concerned wife. As long as the doctors didn't find her a danger to herself or others, they'd have no choice but to release her after 72 hours. I felt lost and overwhelmed, so I did what any husband in my position would do. I called her mother. I didn't want to, believe me. Her mother, Marianne, and I were never on the best of terms. We'd never fought or anything like that. She just wasn't a very warm person and wasn't really easy to get along with. She hardly ever smiled, and when she did, only her lips would move into a thin-lipped smile, leaving her eyes as blank as before. She gave off this aura that felt like she was permanently on the offensive. I'd only met her twice, and both times were for such short visits. I got the impression she didn't approve of me for her daughter. Lynn always ushered us out quickly, as she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, which I was grateful for. Being in her mother's company felt almost unbearable, like walking on glass. I was glad when we moved 3 states away so we didn't have to see her often. I was happy to avoid the woman, but I needed her help. I really didn't want to talk to her at all, but I had to talk to someone, and someone who knew Lynn better than I did. So I grit my teeth and did what I had to. "Yes?" she answered, already sounding irritated. "Marianne, it's me, Ben. Do you have a minute to talk?" I asked. I could hear her cluck her tongue in irritation. "I'm in the middle of writing some checks, but if you insist, I suppose I can spare a moment." "What is it that you want to discuss, Benjamin?" she said coolly. "It's about Lynn. She's been acting strangely, and I was wondering if you had any idea whether there was something—" I was quickly interrupted. "It's a bit difficult to follow your rambling, Benjamin. What is that you want from me?" she asked. I could almost see her standing there in her thin sweater and slacks, tapping her fingernails impatiently on the table. "I wanted to know if you'd ever noticed any odd behavior, or possibly any mental health issues," I asked. There was a long, uncomfortable pause that I couldn't tell was because she was just thinking or something else. Finally, after a few seconds, she spoke. "I'm not sure if this is one of your jokes, Benjamin, but if so, I don't find the humor in it. Now, I do have business to attend to, as I've said, so if you don't mind," she said, but I cut her off before she could get rid of me. "Marianne, it's not a joke. I'm sincerely concerned about Lynn's mental health. Her behavior has been very erratic lately. I'm very worried about her, and I figured as her mother you would be as well," I said, my frustration evident in my voice. "If you're truly concerned, then I suggest you get the health professionals involved. I don't know what you expect of me," she snapped. I could tell she was seconds away from hanging up, and for some reason I was desperate not to let her. I had the feeling that she knew a lot more than she was letting on. "Please, if not for me, do it for Lynn." I tried. I heard a faint, shaky intake of breath as if she were trying to hold her steely persona together, but failing. "Marianne, I started. "Benjamin, I don't know what to tell you. My only advice would be to seek professional help. Do not call here again. Goodbye." I tried to call out to her, but she'd hung up. I tried to wrap my head around the call and her refusal to help me. Even if she didn't like me, why wouldn't she want to help her own daughter? I couldn't understand that. I tried to replay the conversation, desperate to find something I missed. After a while, I almost gave up until I remembered her last words to me. "Seek professional help." She'd said those words with a bit of urgency. I could have just been grasping at straws, but no. I was sure her voice had changed ever so slightly when she'd said that. As if they were very important. What had she meant? I assumed she'd been referring to medical professionals, but maybe she was referring to someone else. Someone that she didn't, for some reason, feel comfortable saying directly. Or maybe I was just desperate. I waited for Chris to get home, and after a very long and exhausting conversation with him and Rebecca, I convinced them that Lynn truly needed psychiatric help. I didn't tell them everything. I wasn't prepared to go into it yet, but I told them about our last encounter. How she'd hidden in the bathroom, peeking at me from the closet. They were obviously shocked, but thankfully they believed me. They too just wanted to help her. Still, they didn't think it was all that serious. Weird, maybe, but not dangerous. They just kept saying that Lynn had to be playing some kind of weird joke. "Maybe for YouTube?" Rebecca offered, if only half-heartedly. Chris didn't think we should involve the police just yet. He offered instead to go with me, and I readily accepted. He reasoned that calmly talking to her, trying to coax her into going willingly, was the best recourse. I agreed to do it his way. At least I wouldn't be going into that house alone. We drove over this morning just after breakfast. There was no way I was going at night. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach began doing somersaults. Her car wasn't there, but I still didn't let my guard down. The front door was ajar, and for a split second I thought we'd see her eyes staring through the gap. I was shaking and starting to sweat. Chris, however, was fine. He waited for me to open the door, his hands in his pockets like he was going on a fucking stroll through the park. I envied his ignorance. I pushed the door open and was immediately hit with the stench of rot. Chris smelled it too, and he walked in the house behind me with his nose scrunched up. "What do you guys use to clean the floors around here, shit?" Chris mumbled. "Shut up," I said, my eyes darting around for any signs of Lynn. The house was deadly quiet and dark, despite being 10 in the morning. All the curtains were closed up tight, refusing to allow any sunlight inside. If I hadn't left it just 2 days prior, I'd have thought the house to be abandoned. We moved through each room, carefully checking any place that she might hide, occasionally calling her name. "Why the fuck are you looking under the couch?" Chris asked eventually. "Aren't we looking for your wife?" He was looking at me like I was a moron. "Let's just go upstairs," I whispered. He shook his head but followed me up the stairs to check the bathroom and spare bedroom. On the way up, my shoes crunched over pieces of glass that looked to be littered over a few of the steps. I noticed that one of Lynn and my wedding portraits that hung on the wall along the staircase had been smashed. The frame hung crookedly, all the glass removed. I stared at the picture, a lump forming in my throat. We had taken the photo just after leaving the church after saying our vows. She looked so beautiful in her white gown. I looked at Lynn's beautiful face. I never dreamed her face would ever be a source of terror for me. We climbed the rest of the steps and checked the spare bedroom, but it looked completely untouched. I was hesitant to go into the bathroom, my fear from that night coming back to me all at once. Chris noticed and offered to go in by himself, but I couldn't let him do that. So we walked in together, checking the closet and the shower. The bathroom looked as if it hadn't been touched since the night I left. "I don't think she's here, Ben. Why don't you pack some clothes and we'll try coming back tomorrow or something?" Chris said. I nodded and went into our bedroom and shoved some clothes into a duffel bag. When I checked inside our closet, I came across the source of the smell and gagged. Chris took one look and lost all color in his face. He had to go stand by the stairs to get away from the sight and smell. I gazed down in shock at what lay inside my bedroom closet. Soaking into the rug were at least a dozen eyeballs, all carefully laid out in pairs. Some were as large as a quarter, while others were as tiny as a marble. I stared down at the eyes she'd collected from small animals, and I wondered how she'd gotten them, and shuddered at the thought. Man, I thought I had it bad with Becca's shoe addiction, but fuck me. Your wife's in here collecting eyeballs, Chris said, gagging. Ben, I think we should go. He called from the hall. I'm getting nauseous. All right. I grabbed my duffel and shut the closet door on my new nightmare. I stepped out into the hall and took a deep breath of air. I could taste the rot on my tongue and I couldn't help but gag. Who the fuck lines up eyeballs in their closet like that? Chris mumbled. I tried to tell you she needed help, I said. She doesn't need help, Ben. She needs a fucking exorcist, he said. You coming or what? I can't stand the smell any. His words died in his throat and his eyes grew wide with fear. I didn't ask him why. I could feel it. Someone was watching me and I didn't think it was the eyes in the closet. I turned around, my eyes slowly scanning the bedroom. Christ, I whispered as I finally saw what we'd missed. Under the bed, curled on her side, watching us with the excitement of a kid on Christmas morning, was my wife. She held her hands together just under her chin, and they were shaking eagerly. Now that she knew she'd been found, I could hear the quiet noises she was making. A sort of hiccuping sound in her throat, as if the excitement was just too much for her. It was unnerving to say the least. Wide eyes and that same huge smile. Everything in me told me to run, but I forced it away. This was my wife. No matter how twisted, she was still the woman I married. I had to help her. Lynn, I said softly. She didn't respond, but her head bobbed back and forth in two quick little movements as if she were nodding. Baby, I just want to help, okay? Can you let me do that? I asked. I had taken a single step forward, approaching her like some kind of dangerous animal. I love you, Lynn, I said softly, taking another step closer. She let a tiny moan escape her wide-open mouth, and I had to resist the urge to run. Her shoulders were starting to quiver, and her eyes grew as large as saucers. I crouched down so I could see her better, and immediately saw the blood. Her hands were covered in it. They trembled more the closer I got, as if she was barely able to contain herself. Lynn, are you hurt? You're bleeding, I said. She bobbed her head again, her bloody fingers moving up and down as if playing an invisible piano. They occasionally grazed her chin, leaving smears of blood on her skin. I wanted to recoil in disgust. The smell that was coming off of her was revolting. I could feel the vomit trying to climb up my throat. Her lips were dry and stretched thin, blood seeping between the cracks. I knew she wouldn't come out on her own, but I didn't want to leave her in the state she was in. I scooted closer and reached out to her. The excited hiccuping sounds got louder and her hands shook, fingers flexing. It was then that I could see the blood oozing from in between her fingers. Oh my God, Lynn, you're bleeding, I said. Instinctively, I reached out to take her hand, but before I could even touch her, her hand sprang out towards me. A sharp pain shot through my arm, and I fell back on my ass. My arm burned, and I could see the blood dripping down onto the carpet. I looked back at her in shock and saw her grinning madly, her fingers clutching a large shard of glass. "You all right in there?" Chris asked from behind me. I turned my head slightly and nodded to him, cradling my arm to my chest. When I turned back to face Lynn, I saw that her focus had shifted. She wasn't looking at me anymore, and she wasn't smiling anymore either. She was staring past me, her eyes glaring at Chris the way a hungry lion might stare at an antelope. Her mouth was still hanging open, but it was twisted into a snarl. I got to my feet and began walking backwards down the hall, afraid to take my eyes off her. "Are you bleeding?" Chris asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Lynn started fast scooting out from under the bed, the glass shard still in her fist. "Chris, run, go," I yelled. He must have been too afraid to move, because a second later I felt my back bump into him. He was still standing at the top of the stairs, staring at the horror that was my wife. Lynn had crawled completely out from under the bed and stood in the bedroom doorway, her face twisted in rage. Her whole body was visibly tense. Blood ran down her fingers and onto the floor. "Jesus, Lynn," Chris said. You, playing hide and seek?" I reached back and pushed him towards the steps. "Move your ass, Chris," I said as quietly but firmly as I could. Lynn bobbed her head in fast, sharp motions and began to grin, stretching her mouth open wider and wider so that her chin seemed to touch her chest. I heard Chris mutter a prayer, and then he was running down the stairs. I stood at the top of the steps, stuck between the love for a woman who clearly needed serious help and self-preservation. "I only want to help," I said, choking back tears. Her eyes focused on me once again as she slowly lifted the glass, holding it out in front of her. And then she started sprinting towards me, grinning with utter excitement. Thankfully, my body took over and I flew down the stairs, skipping 2 or 3 at a time. I made it to the front door before I felt her leap onto my back, wrapping her arms around my neck, her open mouth next to my ear so that I could hear those terrible hiccuping sounds up close. I shook her off me, knocking her to the floor. I felt a searing pain in my back as she went, but I tore open the front door and bolted to my car. Chris was standing in the front yard talking on the phone with the police. I didn't say a word, I just ran to my car and jumped in. Chris took the hint and followed me, still on the line with 911. I watched the rear-view mirror, sure I'd see her there running after us, but I never did. I went straight to the ER and got 11 stitches in my arm and 3 on my back. The police asked a lot of questions and went back to the house to do a search, but of course Lynn wasn't there. They advised me to stay with a friend or relative for a while and to file a restraining order as soon as I could, but none of those things would matter. Somehow I just knew. I dropped Chris off at home and went to a motel an hour away. I wanted to put as much distance between me and Lynn as I could. This is where I've been for the last 4 hours. I thought maybe the police would find her. Maybe they'd get her the help she desperately needs. But now I don't think so. Because 40 minutes ago I got a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. "I found you," and a picture attached. The picture was dark and grainy, but I instantly knew what it was. There was no mistaking my wife's eye. I started typing this out immediately after. I don't know what to do. I'm alone and scared, and I can't help but feel that I'm being watched. We thought it was just a camping trip, a weekend escape to the woods. We didn't believe the stories, the warnings about what's out there watching. We laughed when we found the tracks. We thought it was just a joke. But by the time the sun rose, only 2 of us were left, running for our lives, leaving the others behind in the darkness. If you ever go into the woods and the forest goes silent, run. Don't look back, because that's when it comes for you. The forest was beautiful at first. The kind of serene, untouched beauty you only see in photos. The Pacific Northwest in early autumn, golden sunlight streaming through the canopy, a faint mist clinging to the ground. Everything smelled like pine needles and damp earth. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway. Me, my boyfriend Jake, and our best friends, Carly and Trevor. 2 couples, 2 tents, and a weekend of hiking, campfires, and s'mores. Jake had even joked about proposing on the trip. We were hiking up this old trail when Carly spotted the footprints. "Hey, come check this out," she called out, crouched low in the dirt. I thought she'd found something cool, maybe a deer print or even bear tracks. But when I got closer, the air felt colder somehow. like the forest had inhaled and was holding its breath. The tracks were enormous, at least twice the size of Trevor's boot, and spaced far apart like whatever made them had a huge stride. The edges were deep, pressed into the dirt as though something impossibly heavy had passed through. They were eerily human-shaped 5 toes, a heel but grotesquely large. "What the hell is that?" Carly asked, grinning nervously. "A hoax or what?" Jake snorted. "Bigfoot, obviously. Or a bear," Trevor offered, though his voice wasn't convincing. He bent down, running his fingers over the edge of the print. "Except, bears don't leave tracks like this." "Don't be dramatic," Carly teased, but her voice cracked slightly at the edges. She looked up at me and laughed nervously. "I mean, it's not like it's real, right?" None of us answered. Jake made a joke about TikTok and staged a mock Bigfoot sighting video. It was stupid, but it made us laugh, and we moved on, leaving the tracks behind. That night, the forest was quieter than it should have been. At first, we didn't notice. We were too busy setting up camp, getting the fire started, and arguing over who got the last marshmallow. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, it hit me there weren't any crickets. No frogs, no birds. Just the crackle of our fire and the occasional whisper of wind in the trees. "Why is it so quiet?" I asked, hugging my knees to my chest. Trevor shrugged. "Maybe we're too loud, scared the wildlife off." "Yeah," Jake agreed, poking at the fire with a stick. "Or Bigfoot's out there stalking us." He grinned and let out a low, exaggerated growl. "Stop it," Carly snapped, glaring at him. "It's not funny." "Relax," he said. "You don't actually believe in that crap, do you?" But Carly didn't answer. She just stared out into the dark trees, her face pale and drawn. And for the first time all day, I wondered if maybe she did. We heard it around midnight. It started as a low, distant howl, echoing through the trees. Not like a wolf or a coyote, those sound natural, wild but familiar. This was different. It was low and guttural, like something huge and primal calling out from the depths of the earth. "Probably just an elk," Trevor muttered, but his voice was tight. The howl came again, closer this time. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating, like the forest was listening. Waiting. "Okay," Carly whispered, her voice shaking. "This isn't funny anymore. I want to go home." Jake sighed. "Carly, come on, it's just an animal. It's not—" A branch snapped, loud, close. We all froze, the blood draining from our faces. Jake pointed his flashlight toward the trees, sweeping the beam across the undergrowth. The shadows seemed to shift, melting into shapes that vanished as soon as the light hit them. "There's nothing there," he said, but even he didn't sound sure. Another crack. This time, from the opposite direction. "What the hell?" Trevor muttered, standing up. "Don't," Carly hissed, grabbing his arm. "Don't go out there." But he was already walking toward the sound, holding his flashlight like a weapon. Jake followed him, muttering something about idiots in horror movies. The rest of us stayed by the fire, clutching each other like lifelines. The darkness seemed to press in closer, the shadows lengthening as the fire burned lower. Every second felt like an hour. Then we heard Trevor scream. Jake came running back first, his face pale and twisted with terror. He didn't say a word, just grabbed my arm and pulled me to my feet. "Run!" he gasped. "What? What happened?" I stammered, but he just shook his head, his eyes darting wildly. Trevor staggered out of the trees a moment later. His shirt was torn and there was blood on his hands. Carly ran to him, but he shoved her away. "We have to go," he shouted, his voice cracking. It's not an animal." "What's not an animal?" I demanded, panic rising in my chest. And then I saw it. It stepped out of the trees, its massive frame illuminated by the dying firelight. It was huge, easily 8 feet tall, its shoulders impossibly broad. Its skin was covered in matted fur, but its face was almost human. The eyes were deep-set and gleaming, the nose flat, and the mouth, too wide, filled with yellowed teeth. It let out a low, rumbling growl that shook the ground beneath my feet. "Run!" Jake screamed, and I didn't need to be told twice. The next few minutes were a blur of crashing branches, panting breaths, and the relentless thud of heavy footsteps behind us. We ran blindly, Jake and I in one direction, Carly and Trevor in another. I wanted to stop, to scream for them, but Jake wouldn't let me. He dragged me along, his grip bruising my wrist. The growl came again, closer now, followed by a sound that made my blood turn to ice, a wet, crunching noise like bones snapping, And then Carly's scream, high-pitched, raw, and abruptly cut off. "No!" I sobbed, trying to turn back, but Jake held me tight. "We can't help them," he shouted, his voice breaking. "We have to keep going." We stumbled out of the trees just as the first light of dawn broke through the mist. My legs gave out and I collapsed onto the cold, damp ground, gasping for air. Jake fell beside me, his face pale and streaked with tears. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say. We both knew what we'd left behind. When the search party found us later that day, they didn't believe our story. They searched the woods, but they never found Trevor or Carly or any trace of what had taken them. But I know what I saw. I still hear it sometimes, late at night. That low growl, echoing in the back of my mind. And when I close my eyes, I see those gleaming eyes staring back at me, and I know it's still out there, waiting for its next prey. I was 17 when this happened. I heard about the dark web before, but I wasn't really into that. I started watching these horror stories on YouTube, and some of them were about them going in the dark web, and some spooky shit happens. Like people coming to their houses and stuff. I didn't really believe in that stuff. So one day I decided to download the Tor browser and go on the dark web. Pretty usual illegal stuff. Weapons for sale, organs for sale, CP, drugs, Bitcoin and stuff like that. I was going through for some time clicking random stuff, and I thought only maybe an hour had passed. But it was like 1 a.m. I usually sleep at 10 p.m. I was pretty lost at this point, don't know what I was clicking, and I clicked on this one link that led me to a site which had a red color. Then there were videos and pictures of where people being killed, murdered, or tortured. There were lots of videos of them. I remember there was a video of 2 girls, young, I think, around the ages 17 to 25 maybe. I don't know, but they were pretty young. They were tied up in the middle of a forest. They were laughing or crying, it was hard to tell. About something. The video was only about 40 seconds, so while they're laughing, this guy comes up and shoots both of them in the face with a pistol. I was fucked and disgusted at that point because I didn't think I see that shit. I was in complete shock. These videos were on a high resolution, not 4K or 8K, but like in 1080p, to the point where I can recognize the victims clearly. Poor souls, may they rest in peace. There were more videos of people getting murdered. Another one was a woman being tied up in a forest, and 2 people come and start beating her and cutting her with machetes. One of them then started cutting her throat. There was nothing she could do. Her mouth was covered with a cloth. Her race was black. That's all I could say about here. Another one where a woman was tied up and she was facing the camera. She was crying, and few seconds later, someone comes up with a rifle and shoots her in the head. Pretty fucking disgusting. I was so horrified and disgusted I closed the browser and uninstalled it, and set my wallpaper to a religious background, and I prayed that for this stuff to not happen, and I turned off the computer and went to bed. I was shaking and I couldn't sleep because I was covered in sweat. This bullshit was stuck in my mind for a few days straight. Anyway, I am better now. Still feared of that stuff, but not as much. I prayed basically every day for the first few days after that encounter. I am feeling a lot better now. And I believe that the people that actually do this stuff are going to face consequences, by law or by nature. And the victims are probably unlucky souls or bad people that have done similar things. So basically it's just going round and round until one of them realizes and stops. Maybe the victims did something to piss them so bad, or they messed with the wrong people. I still think of this from time to time. If you are planning on going on the dark web, I encourage you not to. This stuff is bad, and I don't think people should see this stuff, because they will get stuck in our mind and could lead to bad decisions in the future. Thanks for reading. I wish everyone good health and never be involved in shit like this. It was pretty scary for me, at least, because I was never into that stuff. And always remember, if someone pisses you off or is trying to provoke you, just ignore them. Don't get into fights. Because someday you are gonna wish you never did. Take care now, bye. Lately, I've been waking up still exhausted. Even if I went to bed early, I'd wake up feeling like I haven't slept in days. Trying to get out of bed for work was almost impossible, which was strange for me because I was always a high-energy sort of person. A few hours of sleep and I was always good to go. I was at a loss as to what was happening. After a barrage of tests, even my doctor couldn't find anything wrong with me. The only recent change in my life was my boyfriend, who had moved in, and I was sharing a bed for the first time in my life. Stephen was the first love of my life, and this was my first serious relationship. I didn't want to spoil things by making him sleep in the spare room. I liked having Stephen around. He made a real fuss over me, and he would bring me chamomile tea every night before bed. The pain in my hip was sharp and pulsated up the right side of my body. I jumped from my bed and nearly collapsed to the floor as I struggled to get to the bathroom. "Stephen, can you get in here?" I cried. A big dark bruise covered my hip, as if I was assaulted in my sleep with a metal bar. "What's wrong?" Stephen said as he came rushing into the bathroom. "Did I fall out of bed or something?" Stephen had a weird expression on his face. I could swear he looked guilty about something. Probably, I don't know. His response was dismissive, which sent my brain spiraling with all sorts of thoughts. "This is not normal, Stephen. I think there's something wrong with me." "You should probably see a doctor then," he coldly said before quickly leaving the bathroom. My doctor was still at a loss and suggested I should see someone who could rule out anything nefarious. Stephen was still dismissive of me as we drove to the hospital. "I'm sure it's nothing. You're probably just stressed from work." People don't wake up with bruises over stress, I angrily thought to myself. The doctor at the hospital took my blood and did all sorts of tests on me, including a stress test. I should have been happy when the tests came back clear, but it only made me feel like I was losing my mind. Something was definitely wrong with me. "I would prescribe you sedatives, but your blood work shows you are already on nitrazepam," explained the doctor. I was dumbstruck and wasn't sure what the doctor was talking about. I have never taken so much as a painkiller in my life. The doctor's face looked how I felt. He took out his charts and looked over them again. "No, you definitely tested positive for nitrazepam, which is a powerful sedative." Later that evening, as I sat in bed, a million different thoughts ran through my head. How is that even possible? I thought to myself. As I sat there, Stephen walked in with my chamomile tea, and just as I was about to put it to my lips, I was struck by the most unnerving thought. The realization that my boyfriend was drugging me hit me like a ton of bricks and filled me with a dread I had never felt before. I emptied the contents of the cup down the sink in the bathroom before jumping back into bed. "Was it hot enough for you?" asked Stephen as he jumped into bed beside me. "Perfect as always." I felt as if I was lying beside a complete stranger. Had I ever really known him? I thought to myself. As I lay there terrified, he was doing unimaginable things to me while I slept. I must have drifted off at some stage because when I woke up, the room was a mess and Stephen was nowhere to be seen. My body ached all over and it felt like I was in a fight. What the hell was he doing to me in my sleep? I thought. I had made the decision to go to the police, but I needed evidence, or it was just my word against his. I had purchased a hidden camera and set it up in the bedroom, pointing it towards the bed. I woke up exhausted as usual, which unfortunately meant you had done something to me while I slept. But I had it on camera. I opened my laptop to check the footage. For the first couple of hours of sleep, nothing happened. For a moment I had hoped I was imagining everything until I watched myself jolt from the bed. At first I couldn't believe what I was doing. It felt like I was watching a horror movie as I watched myself crawl up the bedroom wall like some possessed demon. I continued to crawl up the wall onto the ceiling, looking down over Stephen like I was ready to pounce on him. Stephen woke, and it was strange watching him because it was like he was prepared for what was happening and didn't seem fazed by it. He took a stick out from under the bed as I pounced from the ceiling above, and he spent the next hour fighting me off. I watched as he subdued me on the bed before pulling out handcuffs and cuffing me to the bed. I looked at the marks on my wrists, which made sense now. As soon as Stephen came home from work, I ran and threw my arms around him. "Why didn't you tell me what you were going through every night?" Stephen shrugged his shoulders. "I thought you knew, and usually the drugs I was giving you made things a little easier. Why are you even still with me? My last girlfriend was a jealous psychopath. You're a walk in the park compared to her." So I got home at around 11 p.m. Late night at the office turned into an even later night at the bar. About 4 drinks deep at this point, and I'm tired, just about ready to fall asleep as I stumble through the doorway. I lay down on the couch and reach for my bag of joints and spark one up as I pull YouTube on my laptop. I'm in the middle of watching some luxury cruise tour, close passing out when I hear the front door open. I sit up and turn my head slightly, just enough to see my roommate coming in. He hangs his jacket in the closet and doesn't say anything and walks slowly to his room, which is normal enough. I'd been living with him for about 3 months, long enough for me to pick up on most of his tendencies. The guy really doesn't talk unless spoken to, which was far from a problem for me. He also generally kept things clean on his end, never causing much in the way of problems. I really couldn't complain. So I go back to watching YouTube, and about 5 minutes later I hear the shower in his room turning on. Once again, nothing strange. At this point, I'm watching bare-knuckle boxing highlights with my eyes half open, maybe 1 or 2 minutes away from passing out. I remembering waking up in darkness, my head hurting, my throat dry as hell. I sat up slowly, waiting for the grogginess to settle into something manageable. Once it did, I grabbed my phone, checked the time. Around 3:30 a.m. from what I remember. I was starving, and so I got up, began walking towards the fridge. And then I noticed it. A soft but ever-present noise in the background. It took me a few seconds to really recognize what it was. The shower. Suddenly, the events of last night began replaying in my head. Drinking at the bar, Ubering home, laptop, couch. My roommate coming home. The shower turning on. I stood there for a while, trying to make sense of it. Maybe he went to bed and forgot to turn it off. I shook my head. There's no way that happened, I thought. Maybe he slipped and fell. Realizing the implications of this, I rushed towards his room but found his bathroom door locked. I began pounding on it. "Hey man, you all right?" No response. I considered kicking the door down but decided to call 911 before I did that. I took my phone out, preparing to dial when I noticed that I had an unread text, one from my roommate. "Hey man, I couldn't sleep so I went over to my girlfriend's place, not sure when I'll be back." Sent 2 hours ago. I look at the bathroom door, then back down at my phone. Everything about this was wrong. First of all, my roommate barely texts me and certainly never to tell me that he's going out. Second of all, I know for a fact that he's single and has been for a while. And third of all, who the fuck was in the shower then? I tried calling him. No answer. Sent him some texts, but no response. I walked over to his desk and saw that his keys and wallet were still beside his laptop. My head's starting to spin at this point, and I get out of there. Go back into the living room and turn on the lights. I'm pacing around in a circle, trying to follow the plot while also trying to ignore the shower. A noise that I never could have imagined being so dreadful in any context. Sometime later, I hear something vibrating on the kitchen counter. I move towards it and see that it's a phone, my roommate's phone. The panic begins setting in, and immediately I grab my keys and run out of the apartment. I make my way down the hall and take the stairs down to the lobby, but even that doesn't seem far enough away, and so I make my way over to the McDonald's across the street. I sit there for a while, considering calling the cops, but for some reason feeling too nervous to do so. But even though there's hardly anybody in there, the place begins to feel suffocating, and I decide to leave, walking back out onto the empty streets. Almost immediately I get this feeling that I'm being watched, and I feel my gaze drifting up and towards the apartment. Soon I'm looking at my balcony and I see somebody standing there. A dark figure stood completely straight, stiff to the point where it nearly resembles a mannequin. But it isn't one. If I look closely, I can see it just slightly swaying. I froze in place, my mind hardly able to understand or accept what it was seeing. It's not my roommate, it's too tall. In fact, it's too tall to be anybody I know. Its head nearly scraping the bottom of the balcony above. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make out any of its details. The darkness and distance may have been enough to explain that away, but there was something about it that drove me towards a different conclusion, that this thing simply possessed no details that could have been observed, that the only element of its composition was that of unadulterated darkness. Of course, my gut instinct was to get the hell away from it, but the voice in my head was telling me that if I were to try and run, this thing would end up following me. I went back into the McDonald's instead, locking myself in the bathroom as I finally dialed 911. I told the operator that somebody had broken into my place, but that I had gotten out of there without them noticing, but that they were still in there. It was the story that most accurately represented the situation without making me come across as batshit. The operator told me that they'd be sending somebody over for me to hang tight. I left the bathroom, waiting at the table closest to the exit, until I could see the red and blue lights cutting through the darkness. I went outside to meet the cops, looking up at the balcony to find it empty, though the door to the living room had been left open. They pelted me with a bunch of questions that I found difficult to answer. Is the intruder armed? Do I have an idea who it might be? What are their intentions? I told them I didn't know, that I couldn't figure it out, but they just kept on asking. Soon I was practically yelling at them to go up there and check it out for themselves, and I suppose the terror in my voice was enough for them to begin taking this seriously. They told me to wait by the entrance, and I watched on as they entered the building. I was out there for a long time, growing increasingly anxious at the thought of what they were going to tell me when they came down. A few minutes later, the silence was broken by a single muffled gunshot. My heart dropped into my stomach, and I continued to wait there, unsure of what to do otherwise. 20 more minutes of silence, and the officers still hadn't come down. Soon I could hear more of them approaching in the distance. Before I knew it, 4 more cop cars had pulled up around me, and the scene had fallen into chaos. Officers shouting over each other and into their radios, more questions being hurled my way, none of which I was able to answer. The next few sequences were mostly a blur, but I remember the building being evacuated. The tenants frightened and confused as they were ushered outside, while the officers became more and more frantic. I remembered hearing more scattered gunshots, some screaming, other noises that were difficult to make sense of. There were a few lapses in my memory after that, but I recall being pushed into the back of a police car. After being driven to the station, I was led into one of the interrogation rooms where I found 2 nondescript men in suits waiting for me. They didn't introduce themselves and immediately went into a series of questions, each one more bizarre than the last. What company was your roommate employed by? What was the nature of his job? How many different people have been inside your apartment since your roommate moved in? Have you ever heard voices inside the apartment from the hours of midnight to 3 a.m.? Voices that did not belong to your roommate? Have you ever seen a circle of people standing outside of the apartment from the hours of midnight to 3 a.m.? People that were exceptionally tall, and one of the most unsettling ones. Have you ever seen somebody standing at the foot of your bed upon waking up between the hours of midnight to 3 a.m., only for them to disappear moments later? If so, do you remember what they looked like? Any distinct features? As they continued probing me, my mind began conjuring up some of the strange shit that had happened after my roommate had moved in. Shit that I had written off as figments of my imagination, simply because I had no other explanation for them. I did hear the voices, always coming from the room next to mine where my roommate slept. I was always so tired when I heard them, but I do remember it either sounding like a young woman or a man with an extremely deep voice. I could never make out any words. It always sounded like gibberish. And then there was that one time where I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Still half asleep, I didn't bother turning the lights on as I entered, but as my eyes began adjusting to the dark, I could have sworn that somebody was already sitting on the toilet, somebody extremely tall. Of course, when I turned on the lights, nothing was there. It was easy to chalk it up as a product of late-night drowsiness at the time, and I had never really thought about it since. After doing my best to give them useful information, the suits spent a good few minutes taking notes on their phones. Once they were done, they sat up quickly, told me that they'd be in touch before leaving the room. A cop came in a few minutes later and told me that since I couldn't return to the apartment, they would set me up in a nearby hotel until they were able to get the situation under control, and that I should stay put until they gave me a call. What happened? I asked him. What did you guys find up there? He stared at me for a long time, not as if he were deep in thought, but as if he held deep aversion for what he was considering telling me. Eventually, he just shook his head. I don't know, he said. I really don't know. I nodded, tried to smile, though I'm sure it didn't come across very well. It's the next day now, and I'm in the hotel. Of course I couldn't sleep, couldn't really eat. The officer hasn't called me yet. When I try searching up information about the evacuation on the internet, all I can find are articles claiming that it was due to a fire. A fucking fire. I live in a small village close to a forest named Visitors Woods. From late childhood, I often heard a chilling story about why it got that name. They say you don't want to stay in those woods for too long. It's not safe. People vanish, leaving no trace. The villagers whisper about strange sightings, eerie voices, and the overwhelming feeling of being watched. Despite these tales, life continued as usual, and I never thought much of it. One day, my younger brother woke up with a peculiar idea. He wanted to take a walk in the infamous forest. He didn't believe in any of those silly tales, as he called them. He mocked my hesitation, teasing me for being scared. I didn't want to appear cowardly in his eyes, so I agreed. To add to the thrill, he suggested we do it at night, sneaking out while our parents slept. It felt risky, but I couldn't back out now. At midnight, we grabbed a flashlight and some snacks, then slipped out of the house. The forest was eerily quiet, with only the crunch of leaves beneath our feet. At first, everything seemed fine, even exciting. But as time passed, we realized we were hopelessly lost. We tried retracing our steps, but quickly gave up. Exhausted and disoriented, we decided to sleep and find our way out in the morning. 3 hours later, I woke up to strange, unsettling noises. My heart pounded as I scanned the darkness, calling for my brother, but he was gone. Thinking he might be looking for a midnight snack, I called louder. To my horror, a voice answered, but it wasn't his. The voice, though eerily similar, was wrong, distorted. Suddenly, the voice began urging me, Go here, don't stop, I beg you, don't stop." Despite my fear, I obeyed. I ran toward the voice, deeper into the woods. That's when I stumbled upon my brother's lifeless body. There were no wounds, no signs of a struggle, just a strange, sickly smell surrounding him. Panic surged through me, and I turned to flee, but something grabbed my boot. I fell hard, the flashlight slipping from my hand. As I struggled, the trees around me seemed to come alive. Their twisted branches swayed unnaturally, almost as if they were dancing. The world spun, and I felt myself losing consciousness. When I woke up, it was morning, and I was lying at the edge of the forest. My brother was gone. No one believed my story, saying I must have been dreaming. But I know what I saw, what I heard. Visitors' woods took my brother, and it almost took me. To this day, I can still hear the distorted voice in my nightmares, urging me to run. Floating, drifting in total infinity. The Earth looks the same as in our science books. Otherwise, there is just pitch-black space. Occasionally, flashes of light far away, perhaps a star's death, cut through the darkness like a scream. Random chunks of metal and rock fly around at lightning speeds. I can see the sun almost from every angle, a bright yellow ball emitting flames. The closest thing I've seen is our moon. It looks like a floating cremation ground with uneven, countless craters. I've tried counting them, 891 and counting. That's it. This is all I get to see. I haven't talked to anyone in what feels like forever, because there's nobody. The silence is suffocating. Unfortunately, it was not suffocating enough to kill me. All I hear is my breathing. It's the only sound. And I hope it stops soon. My health hasn't deteriorated, but I wish it would. There's no sense of direction here. There's no day, only endless nights. It happened so fast, a bright flash, a sound so loud that everything went silent afterward. Our spaceship, a GN-13, was en route to the International Space Station when it was torn to pieces. My crewmates Romano and Gian were lucky. Their helmets shattered instantly. They died right then and there. But I survived, and I wish I hadn't. Staring into oblivion, I haven't felt the urge to eat or drink. Strange. The oxygen gauge shows high oxygen levels every time I check, even stranger. I'm stuck in this spacesuit with no purpose. There's no room to move. I've seen myself only in the faint reflection of my helmet. The only parts of me that can move are my fingers. I try hitting my helmet with my fist to crack it open, but I fail every time. I have nowhere to lie down, no place to sit. I just float. All I can do is sleep. I close my eyes every single time, wishing I would not wake up again, but I do, every single time. If anyone's listening to me, please don't reply. I don't want hope. Hope will only make this worse. Just then, a crackling sound breaks the silence. A voice, not human in any way. You're closer than you think. The void is not the end, only the beginning. When I first moved to Moscow in 2018, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. A 3-bedroom house for next to nothing. I didn't even question why it was so cheap. I should have. I moved in on September 17th, 2018, and from the very first day, the house felt off. It wasn't just the creaks and groans of an old structure. It was the air itself, heavy and oppressive, as if the walls were holding their breath. One of the bedrooms was locked. When I asked the landlord, he waved it off. "It's storage," he said, avoiding eye contact. I didn't press him. At the time, it felt like a minor inconvenience. The first few nights were uneventful, though I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. By the fourth night, things escalated. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to a faint knocking sound. It wasn't coming from the front door, but from inside the house, specifically the locked room. The knocks were steady, deliberate. Then they stopped. I stared at the ceiling, wide-eyed, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But then I heard footsteps, soft but distinct, moving down the hallway. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and swung my bedroom door open. Nothing. That night was the first time I saw them. I woke up at exactly 3:15 a.m. and immediately noticed 3 figures standing in my room. They were tall, featureless shadows, so black they seemed to drink in the light from my phone. They didn't move, but their presence was suffocating. I could feel a deep, unrelenting hatred radiating from them. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed with fear. The next morning I convinced myself it was just a nightmare. But deep down I knew it wasn't. The shadows returned every night, always at the same time, always standing in the same positions around my bed. As the days turned into weeks, they became more aggressive. Whispers echoed through the house, low and guttural, saying my name. Objects moved on their own. One night I found deep scratches on the walls that hadn't been there before. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to break into the locked room. The door gave way after a few hard hits with a crowbar. Inside, the stench of decay hit me like a wall. The room was bare except for 3 things: a blood-stained chair in the center, a rusty knife lying beneath it, and a crude symbol carved into every surface of the walls, a circle with 3 jagged lines slashing through it. I barely had time to process what I was seeing when the temperature in the room plummeted. The door slammed shut behind me, and I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder. When I turned, there they were, closer than ever. The shadows had faces now, twisted and horrifying, their mouths frozen in silent screams. That night, I learned the truth. Through frantic research at a local library and piecing together snippets of urban legends, I discovered the house's gruesome history. Decades ago, a man had lived there with his wife and daughter. Driven mad by jealousy and paranoia, he murdered them both before taking his own life in that very room. Their restless spirits had never left. The shadows' attacks became unbearable. One night I woke to the sensation of hands around my throat, squeezing the life out of me. I could see their faces, contorted, angry, hungry. I fought back with every ounce of strength I had, and when I finally broke free, I grabbed my keys, ran out of the house, and never looked back. To this day, I can't sleep without a light on. Sometimes when I'm alone, I still feel them watching me. I'll catch glimpses of shadows in the corner of my eye, and I'll hear faint whispers in the dead of night. If you ever find yourself in Moscow and someone offers you a house that's too cheap to be true, don't take it. Some deals come with a price far too horrifying to pay. I had been dating Mary for about 2 months when she told me about the marble. We had already exchanged the L word. At least she said she loved me, that she wanted to be with me forever, that she wanted nothing more than to spend every night of her life with me in my arms. I couldn't say it back to her, because obviously how could I? She had never actually spent a whole night with me. How could I say I love you to a woman who desperately rushed out of the door after a few hours with me? Oh, we slept together. There was no problem in that department. The most amazing sex of our lives, we murmured to each other, our limbs and hair intertwined. Then, as we would get drowsy and heavy, she'd jerk up, frantic, her jade green eyes wide open in terror, start pulling on her clothes. "Mary, come back," I'd beg. "Sweetheart, where are you going? Stay with me." She'd kiss me. "No, I can't. I have to go home. I can't sleep over. I told you so." "But why? You said you don't have kids or husband." I couldn't help the note of suspicion in my voice. "I swear I don't." She would kiss me deeply. "I just can't sleep over. It's nothing bad, I swear. I have to go." And she'd leave, I believed her. And eventually, after she told me she loved me, she swore me to secrecy and told me the real reason why she wouldn't stay. Sitting close to me, snuggling up, she said, "Fareed, please believe me, I turn into marble when I fall asleep." I smiled kindly. "Okay, Mary, whatever." "No, I'm serious. I turn to actual stone when I sleep. It started happening after an old boyfriend of mine." She paused for a moment and swallowed hard. Tried to assault me while I was asleep. I fought down the shocking rage which flamed inside me. I drew her closer to me, kissed her, and asked, "What do you mean, my love?" Tears spilled out of her eyes. I don't know why. I've researched. I've never dared tell anyone. At first it was cool. Then that's how I knew. I started dating again, and it happened the first night I slept over with the new boyfriend, Barry. I was wakened by his screaming. He was screaming, staring at me. I had turned into a marble statue when asleep, and as I wake up, I turn back to normal human flesh. I shook my head. I didn't understand what she was talking about, but I realized it was some sort of trial of our love. I didn't need to understand. I kissed her trembling lips. "Listen, Mary, I don't care about that, okay? You could turn into a frog when you fall asleep and I would still love you." Her eyes lit up. "Oh, Fareed," she sighed, "you've never told me you loved me before." I kissed her again. "I haven't? How remiss of me. I'm telling you now. I love you, Mary." She started crying. I thought it was from joy, but thinking back to that night, I realized it was from relief. You don't understand," she sobbed, "how terrified I was of losing you. I love you so much. And the sleeping thing, I've never slept over with a man since Barry. He killed himself. He couldn't handle seeing me turn into marble. It wasn't my fault. He already had issues." I stroked her jet black hair. "Shh, shh. You don't have to talk about it." But she continued sobbing and talking. No. I ruined all my relationships because I couldn't sleep over with anyone. They all said they didn't mind at first. Then they grew suspicious like you just did. Thought I must be cheating on someone. And then I heard you sounding the same. I couldn't bear it, so I'm telling you, it's just because I turn into marble when I fall asleep. I filmed myself. It starts from my legs, and then the marble comes all the way up. And then when I wake up, it's reversed. From the top of my head going down, I turn back into human. I wanted her to stop talking about the marble and Barry and the other men she'd slept with before me. I held her closely, kissed her face, which was wet with tears. "Please, Mary, please, it's okay. I believe you. I didn't mean to sound suspicious. I'm sorry. Stay over with me tonight, please. I don't care about the marble." Her sobs gradually faded, and she clung to me. Soon enough, our embrace changed from solace and comfort to passion. Our time together was the most joyful we had ever had. The burden of confession off Mary's shoulders, she abandoned herself to pleasure like I have never seen in a woman, and probably never will again. It was around midnight, I think, that we fell asleep, entangled in each other. I jerked awake only a short while after, conscious of a heavy coldness pressing against my skin, my neck. Something stone cold was against me, digging into my flesh. My right arm and leg seemed to be caged in something cold. I reached out with my free arm and switched on the bedside light, confused and groggy. And then, in the harsh electric light, I saw a statue of a woman lying next to me, in white marble veined with jade green and jet black. Her stone arms and legs interlaced with mine. I gave a cry of terror, frantically trying to free my captive arm and leg. At the sound, the marble seemed to shiver, and flush of human color started from the top of her head. I was trying to prise myself free, and just as I succeeded in pulling away and pushing her off, her eyes opened. I pushed her off the bed. As I jumped backwards, she fell to the ground, and I heard her cry out in a loud, shattering sound. Then silence. "Mary?" I quavered, and slowly I went around to her side. There she was, lying in two marble pieces broken on the ground. Only her head was of human flesh, her black hair spread back, her jade green eyes wide open, staring at me in agony, her lips open in her last cry. You wanted to dig a hole to bury something in. You're out in your backyard, it's snowing. The air shrinks your lungs and sticks your nose hairs together. It's a terrible day to be doing this, but you read somewhere that the best way to age the piece of cheap metal in your pocket is to expose it to the elements. Bury it. Let the metal do what it does naturally. If you can pull it off, it'll be used in lots of projects to come. You're about half a foot down when you get that weird sense that someone just spoke to you. You pause, foot on the heel of the shovel, and look around. Someone is standing in the tree line about 50 feet away. You squint. You can't quite make them out. Their general shape is familiar, but not specific enough to attribute to anyone. You try to remember if the neighbors were going to be out of town this week or the next. It's just you and them on this little dead-end offshoot of the main road. The next closest home is on the other side of the copse of trees that the figure has presumably emerged from. It must be someone you know. You raise the hand that's not ice-cold around the shovel handle and wave, smiling. The figure waves back. "Morning," you offer. "I can't tell who that is that Rich?" The figure is dressed warmly. Blue windbreaker, snow pants, they wave again. Odd. You get a bad feeling. Are they scoping you out? "Rich?" You call your closest neighbor's name again, nothing. "You okay?" The person, are they even male at all? You just assumed, appears to open their mouth to speak. They cup their hands on either side, and right next to your ear, as if spoken directly into the curved shell, you hear a voice. "I'm not Rich." You drop your shovel and sprint toward the house. You can't hear it, but you can feel it right behind you. It's going to touch you. You pound up the porch, skid inside the mudroom, and slam the glass door home, whipping around to yank closed the swinging plastic blinds. The face pressed against the glass, staring back at you, is warped, distorted beyond recognition. The eyes are melted and stretched, and the irises, horse brown, as long as those centers of those fucked up daisies you used to find, are focused right on you. You force your 1,000-pound arms to yank the curtains shut. You sprint down the hall, and as you do, you swear it's echoing back 2 sets of footsteps. Did you remember to lock the door? You fly into the coat closet at the end of the hall and slam-lock the door. You bury yourself under mounds of stored goods. Ancient boxes gone floppy, and coats, and a beanbag chair and the vacuum. You close your eyes, slam your hands over your ears, and wait. Almost 24 hours later, your brother arrives, looking for you after a missed lunch. He calls your name. He announces that your back door is wide open. He's scared. How do you know it's him? How can you be absolutely sure? You hear him approaching the closet. You shrink back and the vacuum topples. He opens the door and says your name again, baffled. "What the hell are you doing? Are you all right?" It's impossible to explain. The light flooding in is stark and cold, and there is no one in this house except the 2 of you. You pretend to wake up. You feign astonishment. "What are you doing here?" "What are you doing here?" "I have no fucking idea. Did I sleepwalk?" Your brother shrugs. He's staring at you. You find yourself studying the shape of his eyes. Maybe they're different than you remember. You allow him to help unearth your gone tingly body. Everything is cramped. As you gather new clothes, change, prepare to leave with your brother, you cannot find a trace of any intruder. The back door open doesn't alarm you. The latch has been shot forever. It could have opened on its own. It doesn't have to mean anything. Wouldn't it be easier to pretend nothing happened? On the way to the car, you glance with great trepidation into the backyard. The snow has erased any trace of what happened. No footsteps, no scuffs. Your brother pulls out of the drive. "Can I crash at your place tonight?" you ask. "What? Why?" "Dunno, guess I could just use the company." When Sarah suggested we spend the weekend at her family's old cabin, it sounded like the perfect escape. I needed a break, and so did our little group. The stress of college, relationships, and everything else weighed on us, and Sarah swore the cabin was rustic but cozy. She didn't mention how deep into the woods it was or how long it had been abandoned. By the time we arrived, it was already dark. The drive had taken hours, the narrow dirt roads winding endlessly through thick trees. When we pulled up, the cabin looked like something out of a forgotten era. Weathered wood, a sagging roof, and windows clouded with grime. "It's not much, but it's ours for the weekend," Sarah said with an apologetic smile. Her boyfriend Eric chuckled. "Rustic, huh? I'd say borderline condemned." "Shut up," Sarah said, playfully shoving him. "It's better on the inside." It wasn't. The cabin smelled like mildew and old wood. The furniture was draped in dusty sheets, and the fireplace was clogged with what looked like years of soot. But it had electricity, a working fridge, and running water. Barely. So we made the best of it. There were 5 of us: Sarah, Eric, me, my roommate Jen, and her boyfriend Nate. We were close, but the kind of close where everyone has their secrets. The first night started innocently enough. We unpacked, cooked a simple dinner, and played cards by the fireplace. But as the night wore on, an uneasy feeling crept over me. The cabin was too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you notice every creak, every rustle of the trees outside. Around midnight, Jen noticed it first. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice low. We all froze, straining to listen. At first, there was nothing. Then faintly, we heard it, a low, rhythmic tapping. "It's probably a tree branch," Eric said, though he didn't sound convinced. But when Sarah opened the door to check, there was no wind, no branches near the cabin, and the tapping stopped. The next morning, I woke to find Sarah sitting on the porch, her arms wrapped around her knees. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, rubbing the fog of sleep from my eyes. She didn't look at me, just nodded. "I kept hearing something, like whispering. It's probably just the wind." I didn't want to admit it, but I'd heard it too. That day we explored the woods around the cabin, trying to shake off the weird vibe. The forest felt wrong. The trees were too tall, their branches twisting unnaturally high above us. The ground was soft and spongy, like it had rained recently, though it hadn't. At some point, Nate found an old trail that led deeper into the woods. Against our better judgment, we followed it. It ended in a clearing. At the center stood a circle of stones, arranged in a perfect ring. They were ancient, their surfaces etched with symbols none of us could recognize. "What is this?" Jen whispered, stepping closer. "Probably some old campsite or ritual thing," Eric said, laughing nervously. "Creepy but cool." But Sarah looked pale. "We should go," she said quickly, grabbing Eric's arm. "Come on, we need to go," she snapped, her voice trembling. That night, the tapping returned, louder this time. It seemed to move, starting at the front of the cabin and circling around it. We locked the doors and tried to ignore it, but none of us slept. At some point, Sarah broke down. "We shouldn't have gone into the woods," she whispered. "There's something out there, something my grandmother used to talk about." "What are you talking about?" Eric asked, his voice tight. "The hollow ones," she said. "She used to tell me stories about them. They live in the woods and they hate being disturbed. If you see them..." She trailed off, her eyes wide and unfocused. "If we see them, what?" Nate pressed, his voice shaking. Sarah swallowed hard. "It's already too late." By the next day, Nate was gone. We searched the cabin, the surrounding woods, even the clearing, but there was no sign of him. His shoes were still by the door, his phone on the kitchen counter. It was as if he'd vanished. Jen was inconsolable, clinging to me as we huddled in the living room that night. The tapping had grown constant now, louder and more insistent. "We have to leave," I said, but Sarah shook her head. "They won't let us." "Who?" Jen sobbed. Before Sarah could answer, the tapping stopped, and then the door creaked open. The thing that stepped inside wasn't Nate. It looked like him, but its face was wrong, too smooth, too blank, like someone had sculpted him from clay and forgotten the details. His mouth was just a faint line, his eyes empty hollows. Jen screamed, and the thing tilted its head as if curious. "They're here," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't look at them, don't speak to them." But it was too late. Jen broke free from my grip, running toward the thing that wore Nate's face. It reached out, and the moment she touched it, she was gone. No scream, no sound, just gone. The last thing I remember is the cabin filling with them, silent figures with blank faces and hollow eyes. They moved slowly, circling us, their heads tilting in unison as they watched. Sarah was the first to run. She bolted for the back door, Eric close behind her. I don't know if they made it. I didn't move. I couldn't. The last thing I saw before everything went black was a hand reaching for me, pale and impossibly smooth. When I woke up, I was alone in the clearing. The sunlight filtered weakly through the trees, but it didn't bring any warmth. The forest around me was silent. Not just quiet, but wrong. No birds, no insects, not even the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Just stillness. The circle of stones was gone, but the ground where it had been was bare, scorched in a perfect ring. I stood, my legs trembling beneath me, and spun in place, searching for any sign of the others. "Sarah?" I called, my voice cracking. "Eric? Jen?" Nothing. I don't know how long I stood there, my heart pounding as the silence pressed in. The only sound was my breathing, shallow and uneven, until something broke the quiet. A faint tapping. Not loud but distinct, rhythmic like fingers drumming against wood. It came from deeper in the forest. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to turn and bolt, to leave the cabin, the woods, everything behind. But something pulled me forward. The path back to the cabin was gone. The trees seemed taller, their trunks twisting unnaturally. I tried to retrace my steps, but no matter which direction I walked, the tapping grew louder. Eventually I saw it, a figure standing in the shadows between two trees. It was Nate. Or at least it looked like Nate. He was facing away from me, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. His clothes were torn, his skin pale and waxy. "Nate?" I whispered. He turned slowly and I froze. His face was almost right, but not quite. His eyes were empty sockets, his mouth stretched too wide in a smile that didn't belong. He lifted one hand and tapped it against the trunk of a tree, slow and deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Behind him, more figures emerged from the shadows. Their faces were blank, featureless, smooth skin where eyes, noses, and mouths should have been. They moved toward me, their heads tilting in unison as if studying me. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots and falling hard onto the soft, spongy ground. "Don't follow me!" I screamed, scrambling to my feet. But they didn't stop. The tapping grew louder, more frantic, as if it was coming from everywhere at once. I don't remember how I got out. One moment I was running, branches clawing at my face and arms. The next I was standing on the side of the highway, dirty and shaking, the forest looming dark and still behind me. A passing trucker stopped and offered me a ride. He asked me what happened, but I couldn't explain. I didn't even try. It's been weeks now and I still can't sleep. When I close my eyes, I see them. The hollow ones, their blank faces watching me from the trees. The tapping hasn't stopped either. I hear it everywhere, in the walls of my apartment, in the pipes, in the quiet moments before sleep. Last night, I found a small stone on my kitchen counter. It was smooth and dark, etched with one of the symbols from the clearing. I stared at it for what felt like hours, trying to convince myself that it wasn't the same. It couldn't be. I'd thrown it out the window, heard it hit the pavement below. I was sure of it. But there it was, cold to the touch, heavier than it looked. And then the tapping started again. By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. My hands shook as I fumbled with my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found Sarah's name. I didn't expect her to answer, but she did. Her voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. "You've been hearing it too, haven't you?" I didn't ask how she knew. "Sarah, what's going on? Why won't it stop?" There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, shallow and uneven. "They don't let you leave," she said finally, "not for good. If we don't go back, they'll take us, piece by piece." "Who's they?" Another pause. "I don't know what they are, but I know what they want. They feed on us, on fear, on guilt. And once you've stepped into their circle, you're theirs." Her words sent a chill down my spine. "Then what do we do?" "We have to go back." We met at a diner off the highway. Sarah looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail and dark circles framed her eyes. She wasn't alone. Eric sat beside her, his jaw clenched tight. His usual cocky demeanor was gone, replaced by something quieter, more haunted. And Jen was there too. Her face was pale, her expression blank, but she nodded at me when I sat down. For a moment, none of us spoke. We just sat there, surrounded by the faint hum of the diner. "They've been following me," Jen said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was flat, distant. "Every night I hear them. And Nate, I think I see him sometimes, standing in the hallway." My stomach twisted. "Do you think he's alive?" Sarah shook her head. "He's gone. Whatever we saw in the woods, that wasn't him." Eric leaned forward, his voice low. "We have to end this. If we don't, they're going to take all of us. You've seen the stones, right?" I nodded. "That's their way of marking you. They're calling us back." We drove back to the woods that night. The road was darker than I remembered, the trees pressing in from both sides. Sarah's hands gripped the wheel tightly, her knuckles white. When we reached the cabin, it looked worse than before. The wood was darker, warped, and the windows were gone, replaced by empty black voids. None of us wanted to go inside, but we had no choice. "We need to find the clearing," Sarah said, her voice trembling. The path was harder to find this time, hidden beneath layers of fallen leaves and twisted roots. But the forest seemed to guide us, the air growing colder and heavier as we walked. When we reached the clearing, the stones were back. This time, they were glowing faintly, a pale blue light that pulsed in time with the tapping. Jen froze, her breath hitching. "Do you hear that?" We all did. It was louder now, coming from the center of the circle. As we stepped closer, the air grew thick, almost suffocating. The shadows around the clearing seemed to shift, moving in unnatural ways. At the center of the circle was something new, a small, crude altar made of twisted branches and bones, and on it was Nate's jacket. Jen let out a strangled cry and rushed forward, but Sarah grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Don't," Sarah hissed. "That's not him. It's a trap." The tapping grew louder, more insistent, echoing in my skull. The stones seemed to hum, vibrating underfoot. "What do we do?" Eric asked, his voice tight with panic. Sarah pulled something from her bag, a worn, leather-bound book. "My grandmother, she told me stories about them. There's a way to break the connection, but we have to do it together." She opened the book to a marked page, her hands shaking. The words were in a language I didn't recognize, written in jagged, uneven script. As Sarah began to chant, the forest seemed to come alive. The trees groaned and twisted, their branches reaching toward the clearing. The shadows at the edges grew darker, shifting into figures, tall, thin things with hollow faces. They moved closer, their heads tilting in unison as they watched us. "Keep going," Eric shouted, stepping in front of Sarah as if he could protect her. But one of the figures reached for him, its hand impossibly long and pale. Eric screamed as it touched his shoulder, and he collapsed to the ground. His body twitched, his mouth open in a silent scream, but his eyes were gone. Jen grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "We have to stop them." Sarah's voice grew louder, the chant faster, more desperate. The stones glowed brighter, the symbols burning into my vision. The figures hesitated, their movements slowing, and then, with a deafening crack, the circle of stones shattered. The shadows dissolved, the air clearing in an instant. The forest was silent again, but this time it felt right. Eric's body lay still on the ground, his face pale and blank. Jen knelt beside him, sobbing, but Sarah pulled her away. "We can't stay," Sarah said, her voice hollow. As we turned to leave, I glanced back at the altar. Nate's jacket was gone, and in his place was a small, dark stone etched with a new symbol. It was different from the others, sharper, more intricate. The edges seemed to shimmer in the faint moonlight, and as I stared at it, I swore it was pulsing in time with my heartbeat. "Leave it," Sarah said sharply, her voice trembling. She gripped my arm, pulling me away. "Don't touch it." Jen knelt beside Eric's body, her sobs cutting through the silence. His chest still rose and fell faintly, his breath shallow and labored. But his eyes, they were gone. The empty sockets seemed to watch us anyway, unblinking and unnervingly aware. "We can't leave him here," Jen whispered, her voice breaking. "We can't, just he's still alive." Sarah hesitated, looking at him, then back at me. "He's not the same," she said quietly. "He's marked, like the stones. If we bring him back..." Jen stood abruptly, glaring at her. "You don't get to decide that. He's coming with us." I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know if I agreed with her, but the thought of leaving him here in the clearing, like an offering, felt wrong. We carried him back to the car. His body was heavy and cold, and his breathing grew shallower with each step. The tapping had stopped, but the forest was still wrong. The trees didn't move, but I felt them watching us. When we finally reached the car, Eric stirred. Jen nearly dropped him in surprise as his head lolled to the side. "Eric," she whispered. His mouth twitched, almost like a smile, but his voice wasn't his. It was too low, too distant, like it was coming from somewhere else entirely. "They're not done," he said. Jen froze, her grip tightening on his arm. What do you mean?" Eric didn't answer. His body went limp again, and Jen started crying, begging him to wake up. Sarah looked at me, her face pale and tight with fear. We drove in silence, the tension in the car so thick it was suffocating. Eric was propped up in the back seat, his head resting against the window. Every so often, his body would jerk, like he was caught in a nightmare. Jen wouldn't stop staring at him. "He's going to be okay," she said, more to herself than to us. "We just need to get him home. He'll be fine." But we all knew she was lying. It wasn't until we pulled into the gas station near the edge of the woods that I noticed the stone. It was sitting on the dashboard, perfectly centered. The same dark stone from the clearing, the new symbol etched deep into its surface. "I told you not to touch it," Sarah hissed, her voice shaking. "I didn't," I shot back, my stomach twisting. "I swear I didn't." But there it was, pulsing faintly in the dim light. Eric stirred again. His head rolled forward, and this time his eyes were open, black pits, endless and empty. His lips curled into a slow, unnatural grin. "They'll come for you," he said, his voice layered with something else. Something not human. Jen screamed, scrambling out of the car, but Sarah didn't move. She was staring at Eric, her face pale and rigid. "We have to go back," Sarah said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," I said, shaking my head. "We broke the circle. We ended it." Eric laughed, low and guttural. "You didn't break anything. You only opened the door wider." The air around us grew colder, the lights of the gas station flickering. I turned to look out the window, and there, standing at the edge of the woods, were the figures. Tall, silent, watching. We left the car at the station and walked into the night, too afraid to stay but unsure where to go. The tapping started again, faint but relentless, echoing in our minds no matter how far we went. We carried Eric with us, though he didn't speak again. He didn't need to. We knew. They weren't done with us. Not yet. And no matter where we went, they would follow. I think of children and their craving for more experience. They wish, as I once did, to advance time beyond themselves. For myself, it was those dinner table exclusions that would pass eye to eye between parents over the top of wine glasses. They were almost jokes at my expense. I would get it when I was older. Oh, how I wished and wished to be older. I begged to not be treated like, for God's sake, a baby. I wanted to be a grown-up, but the concept was so abstract to me at that age, so foreign that I thought it meant a dream house like the ones I'd drawn on wax paper with crayons. A smoking chimney, a strip of acid green grass, and blue sky all for myself. Something of my very own. I strained to carve out those fragments of imagined maturity for myself, back when I thought maturity could only bring me good things and freedom. It was Easter Sunday 14 years ago. My parents weren't rich, but we were well off enough to afford an in-country getaway during school holidays. We often spent time at the Pontville Caravan Park, too far from the lakes to be described as in the Lake District, but still tucked neatly away from it all in the countryside. 30 or so yellow-painted caravans in a spiral formation around a log cabin clubhouse referred to as the Den. The site was only accessible via a dirt road and was enclosed on all sides by farmland and patches of forest. Those vans were well kept, but always had that bluish taxi smell of cigarettes leaking through air freshener. They hadn't been redecorated since the 70s, and if the weather strayed outside the realm of mild, the TV would static and fuzz. This was only an issue to my brother, already mature, a coolish 13-year-old. He felt worlds away, only my brother by blood. He was embarrassed by me, and I'm sure he dreaded these caravan reprieves as much as I loved them. You see, far from being upset by a dodgy TV, I had my own little cohort of holiday friends that I would busy myself with. Other kids who would habitually come to Pontville over school breaks. Our get-togethers, being brief, made them all the more special, particularly over Easter, when we would all join forces to complete an egg hunt arranged by the site managers, a lovely old couple who kept cats. They would hide these plastic egg capsules, the type you crack open to reveal chocolate, around the site and parts of the woods every year for the 7 or so kids who were regulars. Well, 6 by that time, I guess, since my brother was all grown up. Easter was tomorrow, but I looked out the window of the room I shared with my brother and felt the disappointment already setting in. It had been raining the previous few days, badly, and was still coming down in gray sheets just a few inches from my face. The type of rain I now know sweeps students off the streets and into the library. I'll always now associate that rain with moldy air conditioning and a stale book smell. Deodorant spiked through with sweat and the clacking of keys hurrying to finish a paper. Back then, the rain only meant ensuing boredom. Still, Easter morning, and although it was cloudy, blue-tinged, the rain seemed to have cleared up. Now all we had to worry about were those marshed patches that could sink and stick Wellington boots. We were all given warnings not to climb over fences into farmland, and with our oversized wicker baskets, we were off to hunt eggs. Sweat sticking down fringes, rosy-cheeked and insulated by raincoats. Our parents glanced out at us periodically from the windows of the Den where they had congregated for coffee, as every so often one of us would shriek and run past. Eventually we had swept the whole site from top to bottom and found what I now assume was all of the eggs, shining jewel-like in our baskets. Those cheap things. At the far end of the site, the furthest part of fence away from that dirt road and the Den, was a gap of wooden fence we all leaned on to peer at the disused barn on the other side, only about 50 meters away. Even at that age, I knew about disused. Old, broken, nobody there. I don't remember who it was that suggested we check the place for eggs. but we were all so giggly and flushed that even the crybabies amongst us, pedants before knowing the meaning of pedantic, hopped the fence. We didn't have to use the door as there was a sizable hole in the wooden exterior of the barn that we all crouched through. It was dry inside, and inside, slumped on a wall, we saw the Easter bunny. It sat still and watched us, not giving any clues, but we felt sure it meant there were eggs nearby. We went methodically through the barn. It was empty, but that didn't stop us sifting through rotting piles of hay. Really, it's lucky none of us got tetanus. Anything could have been hidden in there. Anything apart from eggs. I don't remember what the others said or did, but I remember feeling easily accepting of the fact that the Easter bunny hadn't tricked us. Nothing like that. I thought it might have been sitting against the barn wall watching the hunt from afar. We said our goodbyes to it, and although it didn't reply, I do remember one of the other little boys at this point reminding us that rabbits couldn't speak English. I thought I saw its ears twitch in recognition. We headed back to the den with such a tall tale, though we didn't say where exactly we had met the Easter bunny. After all, we knew we weren't supposed to be in that barn. Of course, we went back the next day, our little procession, but by then it had left with only the blackened imprint on the dirt barn floor of where it had been sitting to prove it was ever there. I always looked back on that memory so fondly. Some piece of magic that was for me and only me. Something for once that adults didn't understand. Mine. I'm not quite sure what to say next. Every time I think of it now, my mouth goes dry. I'm 20 years old, of quite a nervous disposition, but this makes me go even paler. Clutch even harder and more fleetingly at my hands whenever a new piece of the puzzle resurfaces and comes into form. It's not a perfectly clear memory, not even a silhouette, but shards of it replay themselves for me sometimes, and I still can't quite believe we didn't notice the track marks, or the fact she was only in lingerie. I remember the way she was crooked against the barn wall and the pale tinge of scar tissue and the plastic carrier bag over her face. Her head had been shoved through a tear in the bottom of the bag, and it was secured with a cord at her neck. Atop her head, the handles, knotted, stood stiff and straight up. They had looked like rabbit ears. My maturity. In my maturity, I realized that her spiriting away the following morning had less to do with the stroke of midnight on a holiday, and probably more to do with a group of people, a van, strong hands to break the rigor mortis. Oh yes, she was probably dead. She might not have been when we found her. Perhaps she was comatose, listening to our sickening inflections. "Goodbye, Bunny," I had said. "For God's sake, I truly have something of my very own, something I haven't told a soul. That we might have been able to do something if we weren't dopey middle-class kids. I haven't seen any of my caravan friends for many years, but I wonder if they have warped it over so many times in their heads as I have. An abscess with constant pressure. I would trade that colored crayon house in my sketchbook to be able to go back and give myself that sliver of maturity that might have helped her. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would wish to take it all back. I would be Peter Pan and keep that childhood memory soft-tinged. I wish to still tell people that I met the Easter bunny." Nobody knew quite how it happened, but it had been nearly 6 months since my sister was found dead, shredded and crushed, on the stone altars of the Equidome. It was not just an abandoned place. It was a remnant of forgotten horrors, a structure that breathed in the shadow of history, a prison for lost souls where time and death merged in an eternal cycle of suffering. No one knew how, but those who entered never truly left. They became trapped in the depths of their own darkness, just like my sister. And now we sped down the dark road through an abyss of trees directly into its embrace. My friend Crow was in the front, flicking the ashes from her cigarette out the window and talking loudly over another pounding corn song. Jason drove, nodding slowly to the music or whatever Crow was saying. I sat in the back seat, flicking a Zippo, staring at the back of her black pixie cut. I could smell her, sweet and earthy through the cool Midwestern air blowing into the back seat. I couldn't help but think of her, even though my sister was dead and it was my fault. I hadn't slept well since it happened. It wasn't just my sister I lost. We were all best friends, Crow, Jason, my sister, and I. We grew up trampling through the woods of eastern Missouri, raising hell as suburbia grew up around us. Now that she was gone, it was as if the earth had shifted by several degrees, just enough to send us spiraling towards and away from each other all at once. But it was more than a conventional sadness I felt. It was the secret that I kept. It was our last conversation. It was my sister's words, I can't live with this. No amount of alcohol stolen from parents' liquor cabinets or shake weed would make these words go away for long. Crow was the first to suggest to me that we go to the Equidome. After fucking on the sticky vinyl seats of her parents' Buick, I sat with her on the hood, passing a joint, watching the setting sun glisten amber over the Missouri River. We had been doing that since my sister died. The earth shifted me towards her against what I knew to be safe. I think it would be good for you. Maybe help you sleep better if you knew what happened, she said. Why do you give a shit? It wasn't a question steeped in self-pity. It was genuine. Growing up, I thought of Crow as devoid of such feelings. At 10 years old, we had found a fallen crow's nest deep in the woods. The hatchlings stretched their necks to the sky, calling for their mother. I wanted to bring them home. With no words, she jumped high in the air, coming down on them with both feet. They convulsed in the nest, so she did it 3 more times until they were feathers and mangled meat. It's better this way, she explained. Now they are free. Many times since, she'd tell me that she wanted to be as free as a crow. One or both of these is why we called her Crow. Don't be such an asshole. You know I give a shit. She took in a big hit and exhaled. There's something for you there, I know it. I want to go at night. She didn't ask why, just accepted it. I needed to see it how my sister saw it. I owed it to her, I thought, to put myself at equal risk. Crow didn't want to bring Jason, but I asked him a week later. Going at night was a hard sell. Easier to see anything the cops missed, Jason said. But we both knew he was only scared. Even before my sister's death, every high schooler and most adults feared the Equidome. They all knew the stories, had seen the news articles over the years. It was a place that created the insane, or at least drew them, a dark place. Jason changed his mind when Crow and I said we'd go without him. Fuck that, Jason said. I'm not letting you all go alone. Crow only shrugged, and we set a night in 2 weeks after graduation. Crow had already dropped out, but Jason wanted to keep focused until then. The Equidome dwelled deep in the Bush Wildlife Conservation Area, a proper home littered with World War-era storage bunkers and cemeteries even older still from towns long dead. The sun never shone quite right there, as if through a thin film that had bubbled over the land. At night, you were set on some ethereal plane, losing all sense of time and space. It was black as we drove, except the headlights of Jason's 1980 Malibu, the leafless trees reaching out from the side of the road, beckoning us to join, trapping us forever. This whole place must exist someplace else, I thought, just off enough that people did things, terrible things. I thought about the little girl tied to a tree, left to die just 5 years back by some faceless monster. Where was he now? Was his sister under such a spell? They were heading towards the heart of this place. These were the things I wanted to understand. I also thought of my sister as we drove. The music, the wind from the window, Crow and Jason laughing all fell back, and I was alone in a room of brocade curtains coming ever closer, threatening to suffocate me. I rubbed my forearm with my forefinger, my skin itchy with crescent scabs and scars, and then plunged my nail in drawing blood. I pinched hard until I was back. We were already parked within the trees at the chain-linked entrance. "What are you doing? Come on," they called from outside of the car. I got out and came around the front, the soil foreign and spongy underfoot as if I had stepped onto another planet. Crow leaned against the hood, flipping her butterfly knife with practiced precision. Jason squatted beside her. "I don't think we should be doing this," Jason said. "Don't be such a fucking pussy," Crow said, laughing and rubbing Jason's shoulder. "You're the biggest one here." She closed the knife and put it in her pocket. I noticed the rub and felt the pangs of jealousy. Since we decided to go, Crow had been cold to me. The tilt of the earth shifted her away and towards Jason, I imagined. "I'm going," I said, pulling a flashlight from my back pocket. I came through a hole in the fence and stepped down the gravel road into the darkness. They followed, and then pulled ahead of me, arm in arm, talking in whispers. I focused on the nape of Crow's neck so intently that I could see the soft white hairs. I yearned to touch them, to smell the leather of her jacket, to slip my hand in her baggy jeans. Why was I out of her light? It rose up hot in me, made me dizzy. I had a thought I hadn't had before. I wanted to strangle her or run and die myself. She might see me then. How can I think of such things, I thought, even while standing at the foot of where my sister died, where I caused her to die. The fall night air warmed as we neared the main structure like heat radiating from a body. I thought I might have been the only one to notice. We came around the last bank of trees and the sky opened up into a full blood-red moon. I would have sworn it was white as snow when we left St. Charles, but now it stood watch corrupted by this new, unfamiliar air. Below it, stabbing deep into the night sky, the concrete spires of the Equidome rose like Leviathan. Its history lay heavy on it, scrawled across its stone faces framed in rebar, spray-painted epitaphs that spoke to some darker insight. Rush trapped. Satan save me. This way to heaven. Hell. What stories each might tell. It took its first breath in 1942 as a water treatment plant for the Weldon Springs munitions plant, birthing death across the European warfront. Peace came. It was abandoned, and even through its decay it managed to live on, twisted by what would come over the next 50 years. A rectangular tower with a single, windowless black cavity, from which a sniper shot at passing cars. A domed water tower atop concrete, spider-like legs where two brothers once drowned. A long graffitied hall with stone altars where satanic cults were rumored to make animal sacrifices. Deep in its bowels, a black labyrinth of tunnels and rusted government furniture they called hell, where girls were assaulted, and the cult performed its darkest rituals. These were all stories, but they all rang true when you stepped within its crumbling skin. And then there was heaven, the Equidome's most prominent feature. A tower of twisted metal and concrete jutting like a dagger from the heart of the main building into all sorts of skies. Gloomy, blue, red-mooned nights like this night. Even the birds seemed to only pass in flight. Nobody knew what was in heaven. Nobody could find its entrance, as if it were purposely, benevolently hidden, only revealed to chosen wanderers. Even its name took on a new sinister meaning because it existed in this place. This was the place below which many jumpers had been found on the stones below. This was the place from which my sister fell or threw herself. She had discovered its truths. "What do you think happened to her?" Jason said, pulling his golden hair into a ponytail. "The cops said she fell from heaven, but there's no windows or nothing. There's no way to get on the outside. How could that even fucking happen?" "That's why we're here," I said, annoyed, throwing a rock I hadn't remembered picking up into the woods. "You've got to focus. You and Crow are laughing and talking away like this is some joke. She was my sister. She was my friend, too. We may have been even closer." This was too much for me, and I hurtled myself at him, but Crow jumped between. "Fucking stop, we're here for a reason. Let's focus on finding our way up to heaven." Crow had told us earlier that she had heard from a guy at school who heard from another guy that there was a way up to heaven, that he had left painted blue rocks in hell marking the path. "Let's get moving." The world was silent, not a breeze, nor the cry of an owl, nor the sound of cars from the road. As we neared the entrance, heat radiated from within and the gravel devolved into mud, grabbing and pulling at our feet. The main building was a long rectangular cement structure lined with tall windows, most of which had been broken over the years. The red moon illuminated a large mural painted on the outer wall, half obscured by dry vines. A mural of a man's head in terror just before being pulled beneath the soil, his hands crooked in desperation to keep himself up. "That looks about right," Jason half-joked. I avoided looking through the black, empty windows as if something might jump out or some red eyes might show themselves. Why was she here? I thought. We stepped through a small doorway on the far side of the structure and into a vast cement room where darkness filled wherever our light did not shine. We stepped through a small doorway on the far side of the structure and into a vast cement room where darkness filled wherever their light did not shine. The air was fetid and stagnant and hot, permeated with red from the blood moon. 2 rows of pillars ran the length of the room, separated by a large groove in the floor, probably once used to pipe water through the facility. Just outside of the pillars, rows of altar-like slabs lined the room that once held up machinery long gone. The walls were heavily graffitied with warnings and names and beckonings to go deeper into the innards of the building. Under our shoes, the floors were gritty with dust and littered with industrial debris and the trash of its many visitors. "Why is it so hot in here?" I asked. "Dude, you're probably getting hot flashes," Crow said dismissively, or at least I thought she had, but I laughed it off. "We need to be careful." I shone his light around the floor, illuminating several square holes in the cement falling to a seeming abyss below. "Yeah, my cousin fell down one of these and broke her ankle," Jason said. "And that wasn't even a deep one. It'll be harder at night to see them. We'll walk behind you, Chris." Why did they want to walk behind me, I thought. Ever since her death, I felt they were aligned against him. Jason playing the part of faux sympathetic friend, Crow fucking me and then walling me out, always whispering and laughing. I wondered if I should fear them as much as this place. This would be the perfect place to do away with me, as accidents were easy to come by. The stairs leading down to hell were on the far side of the main room. We crossed carefully, avoiding the many holes and pitfalls. Halfway there, Jason tripped over a loose pipe, sending it clinging down a deep crevice before hitting water below. Afraid we awakened the place, we waited and listened for some responding noise far off in the distance, for something coming towards us. Nothing. All was quiet. Just as I lifted my foot to continue, there was the vague sound of breaking stone beneath us in the pessimum of hell, as if something were boring through the cement. It was far below and vibrated the floor, only slightly easy enough to dismiss as the natural deterioration of the place. We continued. When we came to the end, we found bones of a small animal, mostly clean of flesh, scattered across the last altar. Chris thought it might be a cat. "What the fuck is that?" Jason pointed. "Do you think it was the Satanists?" "Everyone knows they don't really do that," Crow smirked. "It's either some wannabes or just some animal died there." She stepped towards the altar, pulled her backpack around her front, and unzipped it. She picked up each bone, running them through her fingers and dropping them into her backpack. "What are you doing?" Jason was taken aback. "Don't worry about it." Crow smiled playfully at him. I knew what she was doing. She told me the day she suggested the Equidome, and for a moment regretted it before relishing in it. She explained she sleeps with them, surrounds herself with them tucked under her blanket. All sorts of bones. Bones left over from meals. Bones she finds on the road or in the woods. Bones from a family pet they buried in the yard and she dug back up. "Why?" I had asked. "Because being that close to death is comforting. The quiet of it all. I feel more alive," she explained. It should have turned him off, I knew that, but it had the opposite effect. "Let's move on," I said, pointing my flashlight towards a hole in the floor with a stone staircase falling quickly into the void. Scrawled in black paint above it were the words, "Your dreams lie below with us in hell," with an arrow pointing down. "Either of you ever been down there before?" Crow shook her head. Jason told another story about his cousin once being chased out by a group of men, naked with burlap sacks on their heads. "Was that before or after she broke her ankle?" I asked. "Fuck you," Jason laughed. Crow shrugged and headed towards the stairs. Why can't I even get a laugh out of her, I thought. If Jason said it, she would have laughed. They were joined against me, and I didn't know why. The stairs lacked railing, and the flashlight shined in all directions, would not land on either ground or wall, so that I felt as if we were descending into the depths of a great black lake. It was only at the last few steps that the floor revealed itself, strewn with rusted metal and other refuse from the Equidome's days of use, and cigarette butts, shattered glass pipes, and unwrapped condoms from its nights of misuse. As if appearing from nothing, we were at the end of a long, narrow hall with doorless entries into many rooms littering each wall, the end of which still a mystery to us. To me, the heat was suffocating, radiating like a beating heart veiled by the darkness. I took my shirt off and put it in his backpack. Crow and Jason looked at me confused, but the time for joking had passed. "The guy said the bluestones start 12 doors down on the right," Crow said, pointing into the black. "Give me the flashlight. It'll help us find them faster, since I know what we're looking for." If Crow asked, I would oblige and handed it to her as we made their way slowly down the hall, counting doors as we went. "It smells like shit down here, like there's something dead," Jason said. "I still don't understand why we couldn't do this during the day." "It's just as dark down here during the day, so just pretend," Crow said. We came to the 12th door and stepped in. Crow scanned the room with the flashlight. The room was square, bare, and only about 30 feet long. At the end was a shaft falling into another black abyss. "I wonder what's in there," Jason said. We peered over the edge, and it was not an abyss at all, but had a floor about 15 feet below, framing another stone slab, this one with a jagged pipe jutting upwards from it. The flashlight flashed against something metal and polished next to the altar. "Crow, shine the light there," I said. "Jason, isn't that the ring your dad gave you that you've been missing? How'd that get?" "Do you guys hear that?" Crow asked, a kind of fear building in her voice that I had never seen in her. "Hear what?" I asked. "They are screaming. I can't get them to stop. So many voices all at once. They are so fucking loud." I moved towards her, but she flung me off, swinging her arms wildly and pacing back and forth. As if caught in a trap, she stopped. Her body rigored, her eyes mesmerized by something on the back wall unseen to me and Jason. Then she screamed loud and long, echoing through the dark halls of hell. as quickly as it started, and before I could stop her, she ran from the room with the flashlight and we were left in darkness. We came out into the hallway to follow her, but she was gone, absorbed by the dark. What the fuck was that? Jason was frantic. We shouldn't fucking be here. How can she disappear like that? We need to get out of here. Calm down. I grabbed him by the shoulders and pulled him back into the 12th room. I don't know what just happened, but there's nothing we can do about it. I didn't realize that I'd felt this way all along until I said it. Jason, I don't think we can leave. I think we are trapped. The only way out is to keep going. We need to find the blue rocks. It took some time, but eventually Jason calmed. High above us, the concrete had been busted through long ago, and crimson moonlight filled the room. As our eyes adjusted to the dark, the stone walls seemed to flow and glimmer with blood. We searched the room for the blue rocks on our hands and knees, methodically, as if it were a key to our cage or a rope out of the depths of the great black lake. We were at the edge of the shaft. Jason, how is your ring down there? It's been missing, right? I really don't know how it's there, but I have an idea. I could tell you a bunch of bullshit right now and it might work, but I've been meaning to tell you. Your sister and I, you know we were close. I gave her the ring. Why? I already knew. I needed him to say it. We were screwing around, but it was more than that. I stood up. Jason met me eye to eye, crimson faces. Did you know she was pregnant? I said through gritted teeth. Shit, no man, she was pregnant. My sister had told me through streaming tears the day before she died. She wouldn't tell from whom. It didn't matter, she said. It would be the baby or her, she said. I remembered her words, I can't live with this, and then she was gone, worse than gone. A lifeless, broken body, and I had told nobody. Since the words were like worms consuming my brain, I can't live with this, I can't live with this. This is your fault too. She told me a day before she died or killed herself or whatever that she couldn't live with it. God damn it, Jason, how could you? We both did this to her. I could see Jason taking it in, the guilt in his eyes. Jason was becoming me, and it brought me a vague satisfaction. And then Jason's eyes turned to the door quickly, imperceptibly if I hadn't been so close. A soft rush of wind and a flicker of black, and I was looking at the distant wall, not quite sure what happened. Jason was gone. There was a thud and raspy groan from the recesses of the shaft just beside me. I shook myself out from what felt like a space between sleep and reality to find Jason sprawled on the altar looking up at me. His body arched violently over the metal pipe. His body writhed as he looked from wall to wall, trying to make sense of how he got down there and the pain he felt. Did I do this, I thought. Are you okay? I called out, aware the situation outweighed my words. What happened? I'm not sure. The pipe didn't go through. I don't think, but I can't feel my legs. You're moving them, so that's a good sign. I'm going to come down and... A crash came from outside of the room far down the hall, like metal pots clinking across the floor. I turned to look. What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? Jason yelled quickly in succession, and I turned back. Two arms like snakes slithered out from either side of the altar. Brown like old blood, they stretched outward 6 feet in both directions, clenched fists opening to unveil long clawed fingers. Each arm curled towards Jason until the spine-like fingers rested on his chest. There was a moment that felt like an eternity where I questioned what I was seeing and refused to believe what I knew would come next. An eternity that came to an end with the sound of bone snapping and flesh separating, and Jason letting out an inhuman scream. An eternity ending with the pipe bursting through Jason's chest, and his blood coming forth like a fountain seeming to stop in mid-air eye level to me before splattering back down on my friend's chest. I watched, stunned and unable to move, as Jason twitched and gurgled on the altar, the arms sliding silently back beneath the altar. In time, Jason was silent too. Once there was a man named John and his wife, Mary, who had a beautiful son named James. At just 4 years old, James was the embodiment of joy. His laughter could brighten the darkest days. As his birthday approached, excitement filled the air. However, John felt their cozy living room was too small for the party they envisioned. Our living room is far too small for the party, John declared. We should hold it in the basement. But John, he hates the basement, Mary replied, her voice tinged with concern. Nonsense, our brave boy is growing up. He's not scared anymore, John insisted. Reluctantly, Mary agreed. On the big day, anticipation turned to confusion when James's friends didn't arrive. As he returned from school, his heart sank. Where was everyone? Calling out for his parents, he searched the house attic, kitchen, bedrooms, even the living room until he heard a faint drip from the basement. His last option, the place he had avoided since that day. Clutching a Christmas gift from his father, he approached the basement door, heart pounding. He crept down the stairs, only to be met by a chorus of voices shouting, "Surprise!" But instead of joy, terror surged through him, and he bolted back up, screaming. Mary and John exchanged bewildered looks. "What just happened?" John asked, concern creeping into his voice. "I told you the basement wasn't a good idea," Mary whispered, anxiety thick in the air. The next morning, they visited a doctor, sharing their fears about James's reaction. The doctor listened carefully and suggested, "Lock him in the basement for a short time. It might help." John and Mary, desperate for answers, followed the doctor's advice. When they returned home, John picked up James and carried him to the basement, locking the door behind him. James's screams pierced the silence, raw and unrelenting, echoing through the house. After what felt like an eternity, John opened the door, convinced the doctor was right. But what they found was unimaginable. In the dim light of the basement, James lay lifeless, his body twisted unnaturally. Panic surged through John and Mary as memories flooded back to the little one's birthday, James's fearfully glances, the shadows he whispered about, the chilling stories of Gloomshade, a figure that haunted children's nightmares. Now they understood. Gloomshade had thrived on James's fear, feeding off the very essence of his innocence. As they stumbled back, horrified, they recalled the signs they had ignored. The blood-stained wall spelled out "Happy Birthday, James," and around him lay the remnants of his friends, trapped in a nightmare they had dismissed. Weeks later, when the Thompsons were reported missing, police broke down the door to their home. A putrid smell wafted from the basement. Inside, they found the family, eerily posed together in death, John and Mary's bodies forming a heart around little James, their faces pale as paper, and written in crimson, "Surprise," echoed through the silence, a final gift from Gloomshade. I thought it was harmless at first, just a little phase. Everyone gets into weird stuff online, especially my husband, Andrew. He had always been a deep dive kind of guy, the type to research conspiracy theories with the same passion he had for surfing or fishing. So when he stumbled upon something about reptilians lurking among us, I just rolled my eyes and laughed it off. But it got bad. Fast. He started staying up all night, going through endless forums, watching videos with grainy footage and people spouting nonsense. Then he started looking at me differently. His smile grew strained, his glances paranoid. He'd ask weird questions like what my favorite color was as a child, what animals I liked, if I'd ever had strange dreams about the desert. He kept telling me he was seeing signs everywhere. One night he whispered in bed, "You know, Roxy, I always thought your eyes looked a little cold." I tried to brush it off, but the way he looked at me, like he was seeing something alien, it left a chill. Then a couple of weeks later, I woke up to find him and the kids gone. I searched everywhere, called everyone I knew. Then I found his laptop still open on the kitchen table. I guessed his password, typing in "desert dreams," remembering his odd question. The screen unlocked instantly. The things he'd written, twisted thoughts about purging our family, about protecting the world from us. He ranted about lizard DNA, that I'd infected our daughter Emma and our son Henry with it. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the laptop. He'd really truly believed that I and our innocent, beautiful babies were monsters. I called the police, barely able to form words. They found him a couple of days later, just across the border, holed up in some abandoned ranch in Mexico. He was raving when they got to him, talking about doing the world a favor and stopping us before it was too late. But by the time they got there, God, he'd already done it. My sweet 2-year-old Emma. She had this laugh, this beautiful, pure laugh that could make anyone smile. And Henry, my 10-month-old boy with his big eyes and chubby hands, always grabbing at me, wanting to be held. Andrew, he used a spear gun. A fucking spear gun. He'd said he had to rid the world of the Serpent Queen's spawn. I had to see his confession on video, the way he said it, like it was something noble, righteous. He looked right at the camera, unblinking, hollow and cold. I don't know if I'll ever sleep again knowing that I'd loved a man who'd done this. Now it's just silence. A silence that fills every corner of my home, where toys still lie scattered, where tiny clothes still hang in their closet waiting for children who will never come back. The world went on after that day, but I feel like I'm just frozen. I used to think Mammoth Cave was just another adventure, a tick off our list. It was supposed to be fun, a weekend to explore the shadows with my best friends, to test our nerves in the endless dark. But somewhere down there, under miles of stone, something went wrong. Now one of us is missing, and I swear, I can still hear him calling. We'd been going for hours, our voices echoing through the tunnels, each one mocking the confidence we had when we started. There was me, Sam, and my friends Luke, Jared, and Ben. Ben was always the daring one, the first to wander ahead, the one who'd get us into trouble just to laugh it off. But when he didn't come back, no one was laughing. It's strange. We retraced our steps, searched every crevice calling his name until our voices scraped raw. Nothing. Just an endless silence, heavy and swallowing. And then, the faintest echo, like Ben's voice, drifting from somewhere deep in the shadows. Luke was the first to hear him calling. He stopped dead, his hand shooting up as we walked, telling us to listen. We froze, straining against the thick silence. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, his voice barely louder than a breath. None of us had, but as we stood there letting the silence settle around us, we heard it. A faint, distant call, almost swallowed by the stone around us. It was Ben's voice, unmistakably. He was calling out, the sound barely reaching us but bouncing off the cave walls in strange, warped echoes. The direction was wrong, though. The call wasn't coming from where we'd last seen him. It was coming from one of the tunnels we hadn't even traveled down. But maybe, somehow, the paths were connected. It wasn't impossible for cave tunnels to intersect. We were probably about 2 miles down at this point, so deep that the silence felt alive, closing in around us. The chill in the air seeped into our bones, and every breath echoed back like a reminder of how far we'd come. The walls felt tighter here, the space around us shrinking with each step. Our lights cast shaky beams on the rough stone, cutting through just enough darkness to keep us moving. We'd packed extra batteries, sure, but even with the supplies, an uneasy feeling twisted in my gut. Still, leaving wasn't an option. Ben was down there somewhere, and we couldn't just abandon him in the dark. We walked down a few hundred feet, calling out Ben's name into the dark, then waiting in silence, hoping for any kind of response. The cave swallowed our voices, leaving only the faint drip of water somewhere far off. Then, after what felt like ages, we heard him. It came from behind us. "What the fuck?" Luke whispered, his voice tight and shaky, eyes darting back toward the path we'd just covered. Jared, louder than any of us, shouted back, "All right, Ben, you can stop messing with us now, man. This isn't funny, bro." I wanted to believe it, that Ben was just messing with us, hiding in some shadowed nook and waiting to jump out. But as I stared into the empty tunnel behind us, a chill crept over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, it wasn't really Ben. We backtracked, our lights slicing through the shadows as we searched every inch of the area. We moved slowly, scouring every nook, every crack in the walls. But there wasn't a single trace of Ben. Not a footprint, not even a scuff mark. He was just gone. Eventually, we returned to the central cavern, slumping down on the cold stone to catch our breath and regroup. I told the others what had been gnawing at me, the dread curling around my thoughts. But Luke was quick to brush it off. "Oh, come on, man, you know Ben is just fucking with us," he said, his tone forced, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. "Well, how did he end up back here then when he was down there before?" I shot back. "I'm telling you guys, something isn't right." Before anyone could answer, Ben's voice echoed again, faint but unmistakable. This time, it came from the tunnel we'd seen him go down first. "Come on, guys, this way." His voice drifted down the rocky corridors, a lazy drawl that somehow felt wrong. Jared sprang to his feet, shouting down the tunnel, "Screw you, Ben. When I see you, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you." Then we heard it. A low, chuckling laugh, the sound echoing but from a completely different tunnel. Luke and Jared exchanged glances, the bravado draining from their faces. It was like the air had thickened, and now they felt it too. Something was off. A chill crept over all of us, settling in our bones as Ben's laughter faded into the shadows. We huddled together, whispering hurriedly about what to do. The idea of leaving came up quick, but Luke shut it down fast. "We can't just leave Ben down here, guys," he insisted, voice firm but edged with unease. Jared shook his head, glancing toward the distant exit. "I'm going. I'll call the cops and tell them our friend's missing. I'll come back with a search party." It wasn't a bad idea, honestly. Part of me felt relief at the thought of professionals with equipment and experience. But Luke wouldn't budge, his jaw set, determination in his eyes. He wanted to keep looking, convinced that Ben was close, just around the next corner. Jared didn't wait for more argument. With a last look back, he took off down the path toward the exit, his flashlight bouncing along the walls until he was out of sight. Luke and I stood there in silence, the weight of the decision hanging heavy between us. Eventually, we decided to search a little longer. Just a little longer, we told ourselves. After Jared disappeared from sight, Luke and I ventured down the same tunnel Ben had vanished into. We called out, voices barely steady, and after a moment, Ben's voice drifted back, faint and distorted, like it was caught in a slow echo. The sound seeped out of a dark, narrow crevice ahead, just wide enough for us to squeeze through. We moved cautiously, each step slower than the last, feeling a prickling sensation on our necks, like unseen eyes were watching us from the shadows. The path bent sharply to the right, creating the illusion that it might loop back toward one of the other tunnels. Luke forced a chuckle. "See? He's just messing with us." But as we rounded the corner, our lights caught something that made us stop dead. A jagged hole yawned open in the middle of the path, wide and deep, cutting off the tunnel. The space was too narrow to walk side by side, so I trailed behind Luke as he edged forward and aimed his flashlight down into the darkness below. Luke went silent, his light fixed on something I couldn't see. I waited, the quiet pressing in, until the tension grew unbearable. "What is it?" I whispered, trying to peer around him. When he turned to me, his face was drained of color, eyes wide, lips parted like he couldn't quite find the words. He swallowed, barely managing to get it out. "He's down there," Luke said, his voice trembling. My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" I stammered, heart pounding against my ribs. "He's down there, Sam," Luke whispered, voice cracking. "Dead." The words hit me like a punch. I stood there, numb with disbelief, until Luke grabbed my arm, his grip almost painful. "We have to get out of here," he said, voice tight with terror. Without another word, we turned and started back, moving fast but steady, our lights casting frantic beams along the rough stone walls. As we reached the tunnel that led back to the central cavern, another voice echoed through the darkness. "Guys." Neither of us paused. We broke into a sprint, feet pounding against the ground, breaths ragged with panic. We didn't care where it was coming from. We just wanted out. In his haste, Luke stumbled over a jagged rock and fell hard, his flashlight skidding across the ground before shattering into pieces. I stopped, reaching down to pull him up, my light sweeping the walls as I moved. And that's when I saw it. A figure, pale and naked, crouched at the far end of the tunnel, watching us with hollow, empty eyes. It looked almost human. But something was horribly, horribly wrong. "Oh my God," I muttered, my voice barely a whisper, trembling as I stared at the figure. Luke turned, catching sight of it, his face twisting in terror. He grabbed my arm, jolting me out of my daze. "Come on, Sam," he urged, pulling me forward. We didn't look back, rushing through the darkness, desperate to put as much distance as possible between us and whatever that thing was. Every shadow felt like it was closing in on us, every echo stretching our nerves tighter. As we reached the main tunnel that led out of the cave, we saw a figure lying on the ground ahead. Jared. He was sprawled face down, motionless, his flashlight lying a few feet away, casting an eerie glow on the stone. "Oh God," I breathed, heart racing as we knelt beside him. He must have tripped, maybe knocked himself out in his rush to get out. But when we turned him over, the breath left my lungs. His face was unrecognizable, crushed and bloody, as if something had beaten him down over and over. The horror of it froze us in place, and I could barely think, only feel the cold grip of fear sinking deeper into my bones. That's when we heard it. A voice drifting from the shadows, but this time it wasn't Ben's. It was Jared's. "Come on, guys, this way," the voice called, soft and taunting. I swung my flashlight toward the sound, heart hammering, and there it was, standing just beyond the light's reach. Pale, humanoid, but wrong in every way. Its skin was chalky, almost luminescent under the beam, and its eyes, solid black, empty and endless. The thing stared at us for a moment, then turned, its movements jerky and unnatural, and ran down the tunnel, laughing in Jared's voice. A sick, twisted echo of the friend we'd known. "What the hell?" Luke whispered, voice barely audible over my own pounding heart. He grabbed my arm, his grip trembling. "We have to get out of here, man." I didn't need any convincing. We bolted, feet slamming against the stone, the darkness stretching ahead of us like a maw ready to swallow us whole. As we ran, the creature's footsteps echoed close behind, its pace relentless. My heart pounded, my breaths coming in ragged gasps as we pushed forward. Suddenly, Luke stumbled and fell, hitting the ground hard. I skidded to a stop, spinning around, and that's when I saw it. The creature had caught up to him, gripping his leg and starting to drag him back into the shadows. Luke clawed at the ground, his face contorted in terror. Without thinking, I shone my flashlight directly on it, and as the beam hit, the creature shrank back, raising its long bony arms to shield its huge black eyes. It couldn't stand the light, that much was clear. I stepped toward Luke, light fixed on the creature as it hissed and retreated, slipping back into the pitch-black depths of the cave. We backed away slowly, both of us trembling, the silence around us settling like a heavy weight. We kept moving, trying to keep our steps steady, though every nerve in our bodies screamed to run. Luke fumbled in his bag, pulling out his spare flashlight, and now with both beams cutting through the shadows, we scanned every crevice, every dark corner around us. The creature was silent now, but its presence clung to us, a feeling so thick it was hard to breathe. We both knew it was still near, lurking just out of sight, watching and waiting. Minutes stretched on, each one more suffocating than the last. But then, just as panic threatened to take over, we saw it. The cave entrance, a sliver of remaining daylight spilling in, piercing through the darkness like a lifeline. It was so close, a beacon of hope after the nightmare that had nearly swallowed us whole. We made it, or at least we thought we did. Step by step we edged closer to the exit, the sunlight drawing us in, so close I could almost feel its warmth. But just as we reached the final stretch, the creature dropped down from above, a blur of pale skin and black eyes, crashing into Luke and sending him sprawling to the ground. I whipped around, frantically aiming my light, but it was too late. In an instant, the creature pinned him down, smashing his head against the stone with brutal force. Paralyzed for a split second, my mind screamed at me to act, to do something. But instinct took over. I turned and ran, abandoning Luke's final, muffled cries, leaving my friend behind. Tears streamed down my face, blurring my vision as I pushed myself forward, barely seeing the light ahead. When I finally burst out of the cave into the fading daylight, I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, chest heaving and the weight of loss crashing over me. The tears came hard, unstoppable, as I lay there, shattered, knowing I was the only one who'd made it out. As I forced myself to stand, steadying my breath, I heard it. Luke's voice, faint and choked with fear, calling out from the depths of the cave. "Sam, please, help me." I froze, every instinct screaming at me to ignore it, to remember what I'd seen, to remember that Luke was gone. But hearing his voice, broken and desperate, twisted my insides. The guilt clawed at me, sharper than any fear. I had left him. I had abandoned him. The pleading continued, soft but relentless, each word pulling at the frayed edges of my sanity. Some part of me wanted to turn back, to run into the dark, convinced he was waiting, that I could still save him. But another part, a colder, darker part, knew the truth. It wasn't Luke. It was the creature, mimicking his voice, sinking its claws into the last threads of hope I had left. And yet, what if somehow it really was him? The thought tore at me, leaving me stranded there, helpless and shattered, unable to move forward or look back. Finally, I forced myself to turn away from the cave, each step heavier than the last. I had to leave. I had to get out and tell someone what had happened, no matter how impossible it all seemed. But as I reached the edge of the forest, the realization settled in. I couldn't tell them the truth. They'd never believe me. No one would. I could already picture the looks of doubt, the whispers, the judgment. So I rehearsed the lie as I stumbled into town, every word twisting in my throat. I told them we were stalked by someone in the cave, that he'd ambushed us, attacked Jared and Luke. I described a faceless killer lurking in the dark, hunting us down one by one. It was easier that way, easier than trying to explain the unexplainable. They listened and they wrote it all down, but even as I spoke, a chill ran through me. In the back of my mind, Luke's voice still echoed, pleading, calling me back into the dark. The cops didn't let it go. They pressed me for hours, asking the same questions over and over, watching my every reaction. Soon enough, they began talking to my friends and family, probing into my relationship with the group. I could see it in their eyes. They suspected me. I was the last one out, the only one who'd made it back, and my story didn't add up. They searched the cave for days, combing through every passage, every cavern. Eventually, they found Ben's body, crumpled at the bottom of that pit, limbs twisted at unnatural angles. But Luke and Jared, they were gone. Their remains were never recovered. And now when I close my eyes, I still see the darkness of that cave, hear the echo of their voices, distant and pleading. No one believes me, and maybe after all this, I'm not sure I even believe myself. The only thing I know for certain is that I'll never step foot in another cave for as long as I live. The thought alone makes my skin crawl, my heart race. The darkness isn't just unsettling to me now. It's a living, breathing terror, wrapping itself around every corner, every shadow. I'm afraid of the dark in ways I never imagined, paranoia gnawing at me every time I turn off a light. Even here in my own home I can feel it, the creature's gaze lurking just beyond the glow of my lamp, hidden in the pockets of darkness, patient and unyielding. It's waiting for me. I can feel it lurking, watching, waiting for that one moment when I'm left alone in the dark. And I know, deep down, that it won't stop until it pulls me back into the shadows, just like it did with them. Hollywood loves remakes. That's because Hollywood itself is a remake. Close your eyes and imagine a silent film. I bet you're seeing Charlie Chaplin in all of his black and white greatness. But what you might not realize is this movie you're picturing doesn't take place in Los Angeles. It's actually 350 miles north in Niles Canyon, America's first Hollywood. Niles is nestled between the base of sprawling foothills and sits at the outside edge of the San Francisco Bay's marine layer. It's a quaint little neighborhood, one that remained frozen in the era of its former glory. A classic Americana main street serves as an anchor to craftsman and Victorian-style homes. At the end of Niles Boulevard is the Silent Film Museum honoring the area's historic past life. And in the hillside that overlooks the retired train station, you'll see big white letters reading Niles, in the same style Hollywood made iconic. Niles has always been connected with something darker, though. For how small the area is, there has been a surprisingly high amount of death, mostly due to the winding one-way lane roads that run through the steep hills. Naturally, this has spawned a lot of urban legends, like the one about a girl who walks the canyon road at night asking for a ride back home to San Francisco, only to disappear before getting there. Or the tales about the White Witch in the woods and the stories about mysterious societies that meet under midnight's obscurity. Hell, there's even sightings of Charlie Chaplin's ghost. This is my personal favorite because witnesses always claim to see him in grayscale and moving at 16 frames per second. I think every town that is old enough has this kind of lore. Where I figure Niles is a bit different, though, is that it is home to the secret sidewalk. Deep in the foothills is what is known as the secret sidewalk, a long and mysterious stretch of cement that slithers through the hills for miles. It's hard to get to, and is one of those kind of places that's passed down from one generation of young people to the next. A place that you hear your friend's older brother bragging about for years before they get too old for it, and finally shows you how to get to it. Some of my favorite memories were the days my friends and I would ditch sixth period, fill a backpack with beer, and spend all day wandering the sidewalk. What the quote-unquote sidewalk actually is an aqueduct that used to carry water from the bay to local reservoirs. Long dried up and out of service, it now rests covered in graffiti with multiple openings pried ajar, turning the square cement structure into hollow tunnels for urban explorers or anyone brave enough to go in. I can't lie, there actually is a pretty weird feeling when you walk the sidewalk, an adrenaline boost. I don't know if it's the fact that you're legally not supposed to be there, or the suspended train track bridge you have to cross to get to it, or the silent absence of everyday bustle, but the feeling of vulnerability is palpable and hangs in the air. If you go at the right time of year, fog spills down the hill crevices like fingers reaching out for the lower canyon. adding to the eeriness of it. Earlier I said that it's what is known as the secret sidewalk. That's because it's not the real one. I know this because my friends and I regrettably found the real one a few years ago. The guys and I were far removed from our teenage youth, and to be honest, at this point we were too old to still be going there, but we were all together and feeling nostalgic. So we decided to go. We were about an hour or so into the hike, and disappointingly, nothing too memorable was happening. The sidewalk was still there, as it always was, but now it was without our names adorning the sides of it in bright, obnoxiously bad, spray-painted fonts. Our names now entombed under the brighter, more obnoxiously bad, spray-painted fonts of Generation Alpha and Z before them. The initial rush of adrenaline had worn off, and I forget who finally said it, but we all agreed to call it and head back. I think it was less boredom and more so that we felt a little embarrassed at how immature it all was. I mean, we were closer in age to being the people who say, "Aren't you a little old to be trick-or-treating?" than the people who were a little old to be trick-or-treating. So, in a collective moment of clarity, we realized that we shouldn't have been doing what we were doing. My friend had to piss before we left, which didn't help our immaturity-rooted insecurities, but he went off to the side to handle his business regardless. We had explored the secret sidewalk at least 100 times and felt pretty comfortable knowing our way around. I say this because my friend came back and said he saw something that he had never seen there before. Being the aforementioned stupid men that we were, we couldn't resist checking it out. Through the shrubbery you could see what looked like a sidewalk on the other side. A real sidewalk, not an aqueduct. Overgrown and beaten, sure, but there was definitely cobble-looking stones joined together forming a walkway. We joked and named it the super-duper secret sidewalk. We decided that we didn't invest years of our life exploring here to not see where it led to. We pushed the branches aside and started to walk it. Walking on this man-made structure in the middle of the wilderness felt unnatural, but the fact that it wasn't destroyed by asshole kids made it feel unexplored by anyone else. That excited us. We all were kind of giddy at the thought of actually discovering something. Usually all you found out there was crushed natty ice cans and the occasional unwrapped condom. This was best case scenario to us because it was new, and also not an unwrapped condom. Every now and then we'd actually see signs that we weren't the first to walk this path. An occasional sweater or a beanie, and even a single shoe could be found laying off to the side of the sidewalk. At first I weirdly found comfort in the discarded clothes. It made me feel less alone that someone had done this before, if that makes sense. Like trail markers reminding you that what's ahead has been formerly walked. But the further we got, the more that feeling changed. I didn't clock it at first because of how smoothed down they were, but what I originally thought was cobblestone didn't actually seem to be. It was subtle, but every now and then I'd catch it. Etched in stone were letters and numbers. They were hard to see because the stones were laid out in mosaic fashion. If you just looked at one piece, you could assume they were just scratches, but when you looked at multiple, it became clearer. We were walking on a path made of shattered headstones. At this point, I noticed that we were growing increasingly irritable. At first, I thought some of us were just tired or hangry, but it got to the point that it was what I would call irrational. Everything seemed heightened and annoying. I actually ended up snapping at one of my friends for dragging their feet and kicking up too much dust. That kind of thing never bugs me, but for some reason, it did in that moment, and I couldn't help it. I wasn't the only one either. Simple bickering turned into heated arguments and deep cuts. Our innocent day of nostalgia had become a chore to get through. In retrospect, it's strange because we were clearly not feeling right, but not once did we talk about turning around and leaving like we planned to previously. Something was luring us deeper. Finally, we rounded a bend that ended up revealing the last bit of sidewalk just faded away into a big empty field. It felt incredibly anticlimactic. You know the reaction some people have when a movie cuts to black and doesn't stick the landing? The "that's it" kind of feeling? That's how we felt. I think one of us might have even said that out loud. We walked who knows how far, and all we got was a lousy field to show for it. The hills surrounded the field almost like a cove or a cul-de-sac. Crunchy yellow grass carpeted the ground. In the middle was one giant lifeless tree, which was weird because it was late spring after a really good rainy season. But this tree only wore rigid and empty branches. Once we shook the initial feeling of disappointment, we noticed what looked like pieces of old wood strewn about, not like fallen branches, but more so resembling posts or panels. We felt obligated at this point to investigate it. As soon as we stepped off the path, the air changed. almost a subtle pressurized feeling. The wood was clearly from some sort of shelter structure. I couldn't tell if it was enough to be a house or a hut, but it looked extremely weathered and almost half of the pieces were charred. My friends were trying to puzzle the wood back together, but I couldn't look away from the tree. One branch in particular. I can't explain why I was drawn to it. I was standing right under it and almost transfixed. The harder I looked, the more I could hear a sound coming from it, which didn't make sense because it wasn't a windy day. The tree wasn't visibly moving, but I could 100% hear a sound. Like a back and forth type of sound. Like a swaying that was speaking to me. A minute or an hour could have passed and I wouldn't have known. I lost track. I was so locked onto the tree that I hadn't even noticed my friends heading back to the trail. I don't know if I ever would have noticed, if not for their voices calling my name. When I looked at them, I saw each one of their faces slowly morph into a confused worry. They weren't looking at me, but around me. Like when you're talking to someone and they're looking just above your eye or something. It didn't seem like any of them were looking at the same thing either. I followed eye lines and couldn't figure out what they were looking at. There wasn't anything there. I rejoined the group and no one said a word. I asked what they were looking at and I couldn't get a straight answer from anyone. It was all I don't knows and nothings. I don't think anyone wanted to sound like the crazy one. So like every other expedition we had ever completed, we just left very unceremoniously. Just headed back to our everyday lives like nothing happened. Before getting too far, I felt the sudden urge to sneak one last peek at the field. I can't say for sure what it was, but I know that I saw something. I think we all did in our own way. To me, it looked like a fuzzy black shadow with two piercing reflective eye-like dots. Like three-dimensional shaped TV static or a dark smudge on a pair of glasses. Almost like a translucent Rorschach test. You could probably draw any conclusion that you wanted to as to what you were seeing. I still haven't quite figured it out. What I do know is that something was under that tree when I looked back. I know that much. I don't know exactly what it was, but I don't believe that it was of this world. Before the silent film era took over Niles, the land was home to Spanish missions and the Olón tribe. So who knows what kind of unfortunate entities are bloodbound to those hills. My friends and I never really talked about that day ever again. I tried, but it was like pulling teeth. Every now and then I'd get a crumb of what someone saw or a retelling of what a friend told another friend they saw. Oddly, it didn't seem like any of us had the same experience. No one else saw the single figure under the tree like I did. Some even said they saw multiple silhouettes. Two big ones off to the side, or a big one and a couple of small ones linked together, or groups of them clashing. None, if it made sense to me. How could we all share a completely different experience of the same thing? I should have known something was wrong, though, because we are a reminiscing kind of group. We never hesitated to tell a story we've told or heard 1,000 times. But a hidden sidewalk and strange figures in a field didn't warrant at least a couple million retellings. It never sat right with me. Our friendships weren't the same afterward. Slowly, we stopped hanging out as much and talked even less. No one ever tried to give a reason as to why either. We just accepted it as the way life moves. Friends got married, started families, chased careers, and had less and less time for each other until our friendships dwindled. One by one, my friends started to move away. One to Texas, another to Minnesota, one went to Idaho, and one even landed in Hollywood. I believe the field pulled us there. Some days I could feel it pulling me back. I'm sure they felt it too. I wouldn't know because they never talked to me about it. When they started moving away, it always seemed like they were trying to get as far away from it as they could. Like they were trying to escape something. I didn't. I'm still here. And most days when I'm feeling lonely and miss my best friends, I try to replay my favorite memories of them in my head. But now when I do, I don't hear my friends anymore. All I'm able to hear is the slow, back and forth creaking of that tree branch. Considering today is Friday night and the probability of traffic jamming up on the street may be high, James decided to take his bicycle to visit his friend's place to avoid traffic. He took a shortcut off the road and through the abandoned park. About halfway through the park, he heard a whistle coming from behind, but he ignored it and rode quickly away. Finally, out of there and back on the street where there were people standing around, he looked back at the park from where the whistle had come and saw a man standing perfectly still, wearing a suit and looking right back at him. He assumed a bunch of no-brainers were playing a prank on him, so he shook his head and went straight to his friend's house. When he got to the house, his friend was in the shower, so he had to wait outside. Suddenly, there was the same whistle again, but this time it sounded closer than the last one. He turned around to find the suited man standing behind the locked main gate. A little frightened, he remained calm and warned the person to carry their joke elsewhere. He turned to call out to his friend to hurry up and open the door. When he turned back in the direction of the man, he found him standing inside the compound. Baffled by how quickly he got inside, James grew more concerned and alarmed. To avoid any surprises from the suited man, he kept his eyes fixed on him, but each time he blinked, the man moved a step closer. Unable to bear it anymore, James began to shout for his friend to come out. Just when the suited figure was inches away from James, his friend opened the door to see what all the fuss was about. Right in front of him were James and the silhouette of a man jumping the gate and making an escape. The police were called, but there were no signs of a suited man in the area or at the park. The only trace of the man was the video from the CCTV camera from earlier that night. Strange reports of a discarded stick figure began circulating in the community, prompting local authorities to urge residents to secure their homes. Some locals speculated that the figure was a bubak, a folkloric creature, but the police dismissed these claims. For Sui, a devoted single father, the safety of his 2 children was paramount. He couldn't risk them encountering either a psychotic person dressed as a stick figure, or worse, something out of a frightening folklore that could harm them. Each night, before dinner and bedtime, he made it a point to engage them in discussions about their day at school. Their conversations typically revolved around the usual routine: homework assignments, teachers giving too many instructions, and the occasional school fight. Thankfully, there was never anything concerning, which provided Sui with a sense of relief. However, he remained vigilant about their safety. Every morning as he dropped them off at school, Sui stressed the importance of heading straight home afterward and insisted they never open the door for anyone. His worry grew, fueled by the news reports he had been hearing. One night, while having dinner, an unsettling sound broke through their usual routine. The distinct sound of a baby crying echoed from the back of the house. At first they ignored it, assuming it was a neighbor's child. After all, they lived in an apartment with many other families, and such noises were common. However, this particular sound was persistent and seemed to draw closer. Feeling a rush of unease, Sui told his children to go to their room and stay there while he investigated. Slowly, he made his way toward the source of the crying, which seemed to be coming from the balcony. As he stepped outside into the dim light, he spotted what looked like an old scarecrow propped against a worn-out bag. Intrigued, he approached it for a better look, his heart racing. But before he could register what was happening, the strange figure lunged at him. It coiled around Sui with a speed and force he couldn't comprehend before dismembering him in a horrifying frenzy. Later, when the children grew curious about why their father had been gone for so long, they ventured through the house to find him. Instead, they were met with a sight that would haunt them forever. Blood stained the ground, and they screamed for help, their innocence shattered in that terrifying moment. I wake up to the sound of rain tapping against the windows of the studio apartment in Portland I share with my wife Amber, where everything smells faintly of coffee grounds and mildew. A sour tang lingers in the air, a scent I can't place but makes my stomach turn. My phone lies dead next to me on the nightstand. Strange. I could have sworn I plugged in the charger last night. I sit up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and the ache in my muscles feels deeper than it should, like I've been lying in the same position for days. My clothes, yesterday's clothes, cling to my skin with the stale odor of sweat, as if I've lived in them far too long. The clock reads 10:42 a.m. I never sleep in this late on a weekday. A cold sense of dread creeps in as I stagger out of bed. My car keys aren't on the hook by the door. My laptop is missing from the desk. I shuffle toward the kitchen, each step heavy, like my body's forgotten how to move. As I round the corner, our dog Baxter stands in the middle of the room, stiff, tail low, hackles raised. His lips peel back, exposing teeth in a way I've never seen before. "Bax, hey buddy." My voice cracks. He growls, low and guttural, like I'm someone he's never met. His eyes, usually soft and eager, are wild now, tracking my every movement, a predator sizing me up. Come on, it's me. I take a cautious step forward, but he lunges, snapping the air just inches from my hand. I stumble back, heart hammering. The worst part isn't the aggression, it's the look in his eyes. There's no recognition. None. I barely manage to sidestep as Baxter snaps again, teeth clicking shut with a sharp clack. My heart races and I grab the doorknob with trembling hands, wrenching it open just in time. I stumble out into the hallway, slamming the door behind me as his paws scrape furiously against the wood. When I get to the curb outside, my car is gone. Panic hums under my skin as I jog through the wet streets toward my office building downtown. The rain clings to me like a second skin, but I barely feel it. My pulse hammers in my ears. Something's wrong. Everything's wrong. At the office entrance, I swipe my badge. The little beep sounds, but the turnstile won't budge. I try again, but nothing happens. The security guard at the front desk eyes me. "Can I help you?" he asks, polite but wary. "Yeah, I clear my throat. I work here. Daniel Clark. Marketing." The guard frowns and types something into his computer. He squints at the screen, then back at me. "Says here Daniel Clark already checked in about 30 minutes ago." The room tilts. My heart skips a beat. "What?" The guard looks concerned. "Look, man," he says carefully, like he's trying not to spook me. "You okay? You want me to call someone?" I push past him before he can finish. "I need to get upstairs." He calls out after me, but I'm already in the elevator, jabbing the button for the 11th floor. Each second that ticks by feels like a countdown to something inevitable and awful. The door opens with a chime, and I step into the familiar buzz of the open concept office. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking. And then I see him. He's sitting at my desk, typing away with an easy, practiced smile. He glances up casually, and for a second my brain short-circuits. Because the man in my chair, the one joking with Jason from accounting, drinking from my coffee mug and wearing my watch, is me. Number not exactly, he's better. His jawline is sharper, his skin is clear, his clothes fit perfectly, not rumpled or wrinkled like mine. Even his hair, always a little limp no matter what I do, is thick and swept back like he just walked off a photo shoot. He's me without the flaws. Jason claps him on the shoulder with a grin. "Congrats again, man, that promotion's long overdue." My stomach twists. The promotion, my promotion, the one I'd been grinding for, sacrificing weekends, working overtime, skipping dinners with Amber, just to prove I was good enough. "Thanks, bro." The imposter's voice is smooth and warm, like mine, but without the hesitation, the doubt. I step forward, my voice trembling with anger. "Hey, get the fuck out of my chair." The room falls silent. Heads turn. Every eye in the office locks on me, and for a moment nobody moves. Jason shifts uncomfortably. A few coworkers whisper to each other, casting uneasy glances in my direction. The other me tilts his head and smiles, cool, calm, and collected. "Sorry. Do I know you?" Something snaps inside me. I slam my hands down on the desk. "I am Daniel Clark. That's my desk, you fucking fraud." Jason steps in front of him, his expression tight with confusion and just a little bit of fear. "Hey, buddy," he says, his tone low and careful. "I don't know who you are, but you need to leave, right now, before we call security." I open my mouth to protest, but two guards are already behind me, hands clamping around my arms. The pity on everyone's faces as they watch me being hauled away burns like acid in my chest. They drag me out, toss me into the cold rain, and slam the door shut behind me. I sit there for a moment on the slick pavement, stunned, the rain washing over me. People pass by without a glance, just another nobody on the street. I dig through my pockets, fingers trembling, and pull out my wallet. My driver's license is gone, replaced by a blank plastic card. No name, no photo, no address, just empty space where I used to exist. I don't go straight home. For the next 2 hours, I wander the streets in the rain, my coat soaked through, searching for answers. I call my cell service provider from a payphone, but my number has already been transferred to a new device. My bank? Same story. A new password was set this morning, and they won't tell me more without proper ID. I try calling Amber. No answer. I dial twice more, straight to voicemail. At first I think I've been hacked, but nothing fits. How did they get my face, my voice, my fucking memories? I head to the police station next, but as soon as I tell them someone's stolen my life, and that person looks and sounds exactly like me. The officer at the desk gives me this look, like I'm unstable, like I'm a problem. When I finally circle back home, the door to the apartment won't budge. My key isn't on me, and the doormat where we keep a spare is empty. I bang on the door, calling for Amber, but she doesn't answer. I circle the building, drenched, heart racing. The fire escape on the side, our usual shortcut when we forget our keys, is still there. One of the windows is cracked open just enough to squeeze through. I haul myself up, the metal ladder groaning under my weight. My wet clothes stick to the rust, but I don't care. I just need to get inside. I need to see Amber. She'll know what's going on. She has to. I slide the window up and pull myself in, landing awkwardly on the hardwood. As I reach the hallway leading to the bedroom, I hear it. A low, rhythmic groan. My pulse stutters. I creep forward, trying not to make a sound. The door to our bedroom is ajar, light spilling from the crack. I push it open with trembling fingers. I know what I'm going to find before I see it. The bedroom smells of sweat and exertion, a scent so thick I gag on it. My wife, Amber, lies sprawled across the bed, glowing with satisfaction. Her dark hair is a wild tangle against the pillows, and she's breathing in short, happy gasps, the kind I haven't heard from her in a long time. At the foot of the bed, he kneels between her legs, my face, my body, my voice murmuring something low and soft. He wipes his mouth, still hard, and grins when he sees me standing in the doorway. He doesn't even bother covering himself. Amber lets out a dazed, satisfied laugh. "Oh my God, Dan. You've never done that before." She shivers, her skin flushed and glowing. "What got into you?" I step forward, trembling. "Amber." Her head snaps toward me and the joy drains from her face, replaced by confusion, then fear. She pulls the sheet over her body like I'm a stranger who just broke in. "Who the fuck are you?" she whispers, her voice sharp with panic. My throat tightens. "It's me. It's Daniel. I'm your husband." Her eyes dart to the other me, the perfect me, the better me, and I see the moment her confusion dissolves into certainty. She presses herself closer to him, trembling. "Dan, call the police." He gets off the bed slowly, lazily, like he has all the time in the world. "It's okay, babe," he murmurs, brushing her hair from her face. He's just confused. He turns to me, still smiling that infuriating, perfect smile. "But you need to leave now. This isn't your life anymore." I stagger backward, heart hammering, the walls closing in around me. No, you're the fake. You're the fucking fake." Amber sobs, burying her face in his chest. He wraps his arms around her, comforting her, owning her, and something inside me crumbles. She clings to him the way she hasn't clung to me in years, like he's the man she's always wanted. And maybe deep down, the man I could never be. I turn slowly, my legs heavy, each step pulling me further away from everything I thought I knew. The rain greets me again as I step out into the street, cold and relentless, washing over me like a final, indifferent goodbye. I feel like I'm falling, spinning, untethered from reality. Maybe I'm the fake. Maybe I've always been. Or worse, maybe I just never deserved this life to begin with. And now, someone better has taken it. As I sit in my cozy bed, I finally feel safe enough to tell my story. So here it is. 2 nights ago, I was coming home from the night shift at work. My music was blasting. The clock showed 11:43 p.m., and I was excited to actually step foot in the house before midnight for once. As I came off the expressway exit, the gas light lit up and the chirp of the warning sound made me groan. I knew my little SUV could make it another 10 miles before it shut down on me. And since I was only 2 miles from home, I could be lazy and get gas in the morning. In fact, I think to myself how I never do get gas late at night anyways, so why would tonight be any different? As I turned on my street, my gut started warning me something was wrong. I anxiously tapped my fingers on the steering wheel, and when I pulled up to my house, my inner thoughts were screaming at me to just get gas now. I stopped for a second, looking at my dark and empty driveway before listening to my gut and peeling into the street and off to the gas station. I got my gas, even stopped in the little store for some peanut M&Ms before heading back to the house. The clock read 12:02 a.m. in bright green numbers on the dashboard as I pulled into the driveway, and another groan slipped from my mouth. I got out of the car, walked up the driveway and then up the stairs, and let myself into my dark house. 10 minutes later, my adoring husband pulled up and I knew it was safe to go to bed. The next morning, my husband calls me in panic. I hear the shakiness of his voice when he asks me if I had purposely muted our Ring camera. I told him I didn't, but that would explain the lack of notifications the past 3 days. He then tells me to sit down because he had a video he needed to send my way. An iMessage then pops up and I click on the video. There, labeled with yesterday's date and the time of 11:47 p.m., I watch in horror as my SUV pulls away from the house, and out from the bushes that line my property comes a tall, slender man in a black hoodie. He looks up the driveway, then down the block where my SUV just pulled off before pulling out a large kitchen knife from the next bush. He slips the knife into his sweatshirt pocket and slowly slips into the 4 acres of forest that is just across the road. The camera then shuts itself off before the second video, time labeled 12:02 a.m., of me safely walking to my house. Had I not stopped for gas, that tall, slender man would have butchered me in my own driveway. My screams for no one to hear, and my dead, bloody body for only my poor husband to find. Before I list the encounters I've witnessed, I believe it's necessary for one to understand me as a person, and the circumstances leading to my employment with the Eternal Jubilee Church. I'm not a religious or spiritual person by any stretch of the imagination, nothing against it, but I have never felt compelled by it at all. As a person born and raised in the South, I was at a Baptist church for every service or event, no matter what. Large or small, my family was very involved in the church. My grandfather was a deacon, my uncles on both sides were pastors for 2 unrelated churches, and my father helped out a lot with the youth group. Suffice to say, we put the Bible in the Bible Belt. I never resented this, and yet I felt nothing towards it. Even as a child, the songs felt hollow. I remember being jealous of my siblings and parents, for they could find happiness and solace in their faith. I found nothing, not even hatred. I wanted to believe, but I just couldn't. After graduating high school, I grew restless of my little town in the coming years. This dissatisfaction with life manifested itself through laziness and other unhealthy habits. Butting heads with my family more than ever over lifestyle choices, I finally cut contact and decided to never look back. I would learn to regret this, much to the dismay of my family, my significant other, and I decided to move to their tiny hometown in the mountains. Having similar upbringings, my partner's family was very involved in the local church as well. Down on our luck, his father begrudgingly helped me get a job as a custodian at their church, the Eternal Jubilee. However, fate had other plans for us. My partner was very eager to get home, and yet was so consumed by misery to actually be there. It started off somewhat minor, becoming kind of distant and eating less, but it snowballed quicker than I could have ever imagined. His emotions became increasingly erratic, with fits of explosive anger or quiet sulking. He was never an emotional man, so the sight of him weeping was completely foreign to me. I just didn't know how to approach these intense emotions, but they became a regular occurrence. There were some days he couldn't even look in my direction without crying. I would try to console him, only for him to become belligerently angry. He apologized to me frequently, but often over strange and vague reasons. But all the same, he would blame me for equally vague reasons mere hours after an apology. He would habitually disappear, all hours of the night, supposedly to visit his family. Rigid and controlling, his parents would call daily without fail. They'd stop by often as well, but would prefer to speak to him privately. They always seemed to be lurking around the corner no matter the day. His parents would very rarely look in my general direction, let alone speak to me. Generally cordial to their son, they would turn ice cold when frustrated with him. I remember seeing him begin to cry in front of his father, only for the older man to push him to the ground as hard as he could. I tried to intervene, only for his father to walk away, not even acknowledging my existence. I can't even repeat the vile things my partner called me for trying to stick up for him. This just wasn't him. It couldn't be. He would have never said those things to me before. After being coerced by his family, he joined a faith booster at their church and was there more often than not. I could not attend due to the special memberships his families had. I began to see him less and less, maybe once or twice a week. He wouldn't even look me in the eye anymore. Only living there for a month, he succumbed to the battle with his mental health and took his own life, only leaving behind a note, an excerpt of his poetry. A fly fell in love with a spider, throwing itself into its web, a trap maybe, but one could see the spider had fallen in love with the fly. But instinct is stronger than love, oh no. Forgive the spider for its hunger, but who was trapped? For the spider's heart was in the fly's trap all along. There is not a day that goes by where I don't miss him. I don't understand why or how it took such a drastic turn. I feel guilty for not understanding, for not saying the right thing, for not being able to stop it. I know his parents blame me for his death. After the service, they made it very clear they had no interest in keeping in contact. I had to keep moving, keep working, keep my head down until the pain goes away. I'm sorry, Wade. I thought my hometown was small. It makes this place look like a speck. If it were up to me, we would have moved to a city, somewhere with life, somewhere open-minded. But he wanted to come here, to the town that would eventually kill him. For as sparsely populated as the town was, there were many different churches in the area, many of them small and secluded, all dwarfed by the monolith that was the Eternal Jubilee Church. It was not on any digital maps, and actually finding the massive building was surprisingly difficult at first. A massive, peculiar structure, the Eternal Jubilee resembled many of the Baptist megachurches in theory, but its strange layout gave the impression of a building mindlessly built larger and larger. A modern-day Tower of Babel. I know I keep emphasizing its size, and I might be exaggerating just a bit, but it was truly out of place to be in the middle of nowhere. Too grandiose for a backwater church. The top of its ever-tall steeple was tipped in a golden two-pronged implement resembling a pitchfork. That's another thing. There wasn't a cross in sight within the building, at least in none of the rooms I've cleaned. I'm sure there's more. With the building being empty most days of the week, it is a very lonesome job other than the scattered staffing. The pay, surprisingly, was fantastic for what the basic duties were. We have a team of 6 custodians: Titus, the bitter curmudgeon, Shifty Dale, Ditzy Pearl, ignorant Ray Nathan, Quiet Barry, and the forgettable Tom or Tony. Not 100% sure of his name, he never wears his name tag for some reason. As well established, I'm not an adamant believer in the supernatural, but the isolation can get to you. Strange noises, odd shadows, figures out of the corner of your eye, rooms changing slightly in layout after leaving. These are very common things to hear on our lunch break. Much to the ire of Titus, a man who was almost as mean as he was old. Having seniority, he'd often bark orders at the team. He hated the supernatural babble, and hell, he almost punched Ray Nathan for saying, "Maybe the church is alive. I swear I hear breathing in the walls sometimes." He wasn't exactly wrong, though. The various classrooms, gymnasiums, and offices did all look very similar. It was easy to mistake them, but it did feel like rooms would shift ever so slightly. No matter what Titus or the pastor said. The pastor of the Eternal Jubilee was the eccentric Lysander Sinclair, a has-been rock star turned child of God. Pastor Lysander was an odd man, both in appearance and personality. Short and concerningly thin, the pastor engulfed his small frame in a tacky lavender and gold suit. Despite being ill-fitting, this affront to fashion was his lucky trademark, and he was seldom seen without it. They say he was beautiful once, before the debaucherous and drug-ridden lifestyle of a glam rocker left him aged and scarred. His features were ever so sharp, high hollow cheekbones and a finely pointed nose gave the little pastor an almost statuesque appearance. His lips were thin and scarred, always seeming to be curled into a faint smirk. There was something off about his eyes, bright green, feverish, and frantic. His stare always gave the impression that whatever he did back in the 70s still had lasting effects on his mind. The pastor's study was stranger still, a large office of many mirrors with a small golden calf resting upon his desk. Lysander always seemed uncomfortable when someone went near his study, for one reason or another. In truth, Lysander's band was never quite as popular as he let on, but it always seemed to come up in conversation. The Crazy Chord of the Cobra King is the only Holy Harem song to really gain traction. It's catchy enough, I suppose. He is at the church more often than not, keeping mostly to himself in his study. However, he does have a tendency to haunt the halls and classrooms of the empty church. Guided by his own reflection in the flooring, and humming a long, forgotten song he probably wrote. You can tell when he talks to people he's focused on his own reflection in their eyes. Pastor Lysander always seemed to surround himself with attractive young men and women. As disgusting as it sounds, his attention would focus on the physically beautiful. The prettier and more willing a person would be, the higher within the church's hierarchy they could rise from what I've observed. Very fickle, he'd seem to have a new favorite every other week, and would host personal revivals in his office after nightfall. Out of our staff, Lysander seemed particularly fond of me and would always try to talk to me if given the chance. Maybe that's why I'd always be scheduled for the later shifts. The tall, muscular man with long curly hair always seemed like his main confidant. I can see a deep jealousy and hatred in his eyes. He deeply scares me. I hated being around Pastor Lysander. He just made me so uncomfortable. The almost whimsical, melodic way he spoke, his rough, uncanny androgyny, the unblinking, panicked stare that could strip any man down to his very core. For as strange as this man is, the people of this town are fiercely loyal to Pastor Lysander and the Eternal Jubilee Church. With how they talk about him, you'd think Lysander is their god. Interestingly enough, a lot of the members of the church are bizarrely wealthy. Suffice to say, both the pastor and the offering plate are spoiled by the populace. I was very skeptical at first. The stories that were told in the break room would get increasingly bizarre. Horned shadows, beautiful women with gold coins for eyes appearing in mirrors, passing rooms with young men dancing naked only for them to disappear without a trace, hoof marks on carpet, etc. Other than Barry randomly finding a golden coin in his pocket, nothing unnatural has happened in several weeks. Until near the end of one of my many shifts, I'd come across the petrified Pearl stuttering out incoherent ramblings. Trying my best to calm her down, I could only decipher bits and pieces of what she was struggling to say. Something pale and horned had run past her, slamming its way to the stairwell of the boiler room below. Now the boiler room was in the lowest part of the basement, and the top of the door frame is too high for most people to reach. However, I could plainly see two massive handprints stained in something that shimmered like liquid gold above the doorframe. Upon closer examination, the basement was entirely empty, other than a golden lock of a woman's hair and a single coin, strangely bearing the visage of a bull's head. "You saw the one with horns. I've been seeing its shadow for the past month." Dale spat overall, unfazed by the tale. Dale had been working with the church longer than anyone, save for Titus. A cold, grizzled man. No one really knew where Dale was from or what he did prior to getting the job as a janitor. What was known about Dale Ortega was he's an agnostic and has seen a lot of shit in his day, which is an odd way of wording it since he's 24. A former drifter and self-described survivor. I think it's wise not to cross Dale. Pearl, the cheerful woman who never had anything but a smile, didn't speak another word before clocking out early with a face hardened by fear. She didn't come back, obviously. I heard she died in a car accident recently. Damn shame. Ray Nathan, ever the instigator, slammed the coins on Lysander's desk. Lysander, being a man of many nervous habits, began to fiddle with his fortune of gold rings compulsively. "What curious little tokens, friend, but offerings are put in the tithe box." Pastor Lysander cooed in his typical relaxed stupor. "What are they?" Ray Nathan grimaced, leaning down closer to Lysander. He was a large man, thick of arm and thicker of mind. Tall, powerful, and imposing, Ray Nathan was a mule of a man and absolutely dwarfed the most likely malnourished pastor. Lysander gently ran his long, skinny fingers against the bull's head emblazoned on the coin. "You bring before me, man. This is mankind, our very nature wrought into being. The reflection of our soul." Lysander's vague, vapid answer was interrupted by Ray Nathan's agitated snort. "Save the riddles, Pastor. I want to know what the hell these are and what the hell is wrong with this place. I have put up with enough. You've heard the stories, down to the last detail. You've never attended one of our services, Mr. Raymond. I'm sure a sermon would enlighten you. I was born Baptist. I'll die Baptist. Not whatever the hell you are." Ray Nathan's outburst and uncontrollable anger was quickly halted by the pastor's eyes. For the first time since the 70s, Lysander Sinclair looked focused and alert. His horrible green eyes, like a viper's gaze, cleaved right through the big man's bravado. "I am a prophet of the true God, a brute and assailant such as yourself would not understand. Do not forget your place, friend," the pastor hissed. "I assure you this is a house of God. The only thing wrong is those who doubt the word. Now tell me, whose head is on this coin and whose inscription is stamped on it? Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, Raymond," the pastor said harshly as he stuck the coins in his pocket. "I must bid you a good day, for I am a very busy man. Lest we forget, who else would hire you with that record of yours? Feel free to take the rest of the day off. I expect a calmer disposition for your next shift. Is that understood?" And for the first time probably in his life, Raymond Nathan Morrigan felt small. The big man nodded in defeat. It was over. Ray Nathan went into the pastor's office as a defiant, confused man and left it a whipped dog. He was never quite the same after the confrontation, not nearly as loud or brazen. He just kept his head down and worked like the rest of us. I surely thought he'd quit. Haunting the halls of the eternal jubilee, like a somber ghost of his past self. Maybe he saw something deep within the pastor's eyes, a danger hiding beneath the glossy-eyed stupor. The place just felt so wrong and yet so alluring. I would catch myself thinking about it on my days off. Anything to fill my mind in that empty house. Up to that point, I hadn't experienced anything too out of the ordinary. I'd hear a strange noise from time to time, or some of my supplies would suddenly go missing, but nothing too egregious. That would unfortunately come to an end. One night, I was cleaning up the gymnasium from one of the many damned youth activities that absolutely trashed the place. Alone, of course. Everything was fine, until a cloying musk began to choke the entirety of the gym. At first it was merely a sweet and floral scent, yet it thickened into a noxious stench of perfume and scented oils. Out of the blue, I was struck by an uneasiness I have yet to experience again. Something was off, very off. It was like I was sensing something foreign to this world, something not meant to be here. It's a hard feeling to describe, almost like you found out the world was about to explode. Such panic and awe, both amazement and terror as one. An unknown shape materialized off in the distance, causing my body to tingle with a bizarrely pleasant sensation. I tried to speak, but to no avail, as my mouth was consumed by the vulgar taste of metal and an unfamiliar sweetness. Very clearly in my peripheral vision, a pale, naked figure was atop the stage. Too tall to be a normal person with both male and female traits, it bore golden eyes and no noticeable genitalia. Innumerable piercings and chains of gold dotted its body in a sickening shimmer. Whatever this thing was, I tried to pretend like I didn't notice it. Maybe it will disappear like all the stories I hear from Dale and Ray Nathan. It just stood there, staring with its coin-filled sockets. It was repulsive, but also beautiful. I was filled with an unreasonably powerful urge to stare right at it. It took every ounce of concentration to not look at the golden hermaphrodite. Bear witness. And for the most agonizing seconds of my life, I swore I could hear Wade's voice beckoning me. I needed to look, but just like that, it was gone without a trace. Immediately being hit by intense nausea, I ran to the closest bathroom as my dinner came roiling up. Unfortunately, I wasn't quick enough, retching all over a pristinely clean sink. Amidst the acid and bile, the sweet purple froth of wine began to seep through my mouth. I haven't touched wine in months, and yet here I was spewing up an entire bottle. Just when I thought my system was entirely expunged, something violently erupted from my throat. I couldn't believe it. It was a coin. God help us, I just threw up a golden coin. Completely and utterly clean of any bile, the coin was engraved with two lovers locked in a passionate embrace. The voice in my head screamed to run and never look back. Leave this damn town and all these backwater hicks behind. I need to go somewhere lively and normal, somewhere nice, a place he would still be alive in. But then another voice slithered into my head, smooth and silken. I needed to stay. He wanted to be here, didn't he? Like cloying perfume, 1,000 thoughts of doubt clouded my mind. Isolation is getting to you. Are you going to go crawling back home? Are you going to prove Mom and Dad right? You're going crazy. You can't leave. You couldn't afford it. They got you this job. You not only kill their son, but also spit on their kindness. You are a sinner. He would miss you. The church would miss you. "16-year-old Jessica zipped up her jacket and gave herself a final once-over in the hallway mirror before heading out. Her dark hair was soft and shiny as silk, and her shimmery gold eyeshadow perfectly complemented her rich brown eyes. The peach lip gloss she had purchased at the mall the previous weekend left her lips with a soft sheen. With a confident smile, she knew she was ready for whatever the night had in store. The door closed quietly behind her as she slipped out into the night. The air was thick with the scent of pine and mystery, the mixture of dried leaves and gravel, crunching softly beneath her shoes, as she walked to the end of the driveway to wait for her ride. With no explanation given, her parents ordered her to stay home tonight as they prepared to leave for their dinner date. The party out at Serpent River Bridge was too tempting to pass up. The night held endless possibilities. Colorful leaves swirled at her feet as thoughts raced through her mind. Dan would be there. He sat 2 desks away from her in math class, and sometimes she'd catch him looking at her from the corner of her eye. He was quite possibly the best-looking guy in the entire school, and tonight she would summon up the courage to approach him. The bridge was located near Elderwood Park. Tonight it would be deserted except for the small crowd of partygoers, and the darkness provided the perfect backdrop for uninterrupted party bliss. It was a moonless night, but the stars remained visible. This rural stretch of country road was quiet and peaceful, broken only by the occasional distant barking of dogs. For the first few minutes, things were calm. Nothing stirred, not even the trees. One of the few perks Jessica enjoyed about living in a rural area. But in that moment, she felt a sudden sense of unease, a feeling of being watched. And then, out of nowhere, it began. Click, 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 click. The sound was rhythmic, like the ticking of a clock. It was coming from out of the darkness on the road. Julie's heart leaped as she stared into the darkness, her eyes straining to find the source of the sound. A dark shape moved through the shadows, pacing back and forth across the deserted stretch of road. Two beige paws provided the only clue that it was an animal, a canine. Click, click. The creature continued its restless pacing, and the tension in the air was palpable, as if it were anxiously waiting for something to happen. As Jessica's eyes adjusted further to the darkness, she could see more clearly, and to her horror, realized that there were not just one but two large beings walking upright on their hind legs. Their vague, shadowy silhouettes loomed against the wall of night. She gasped and quickly covered her mouth, stifling the instinct to scream. She shivered as fear and realization gripped her like icy fingers. The things weren't human or animal. Slowly, she slid her hand into her coat pocket for her phone, but realized it wasn't there. She remembered she'd forgotten it back in the house. Right at that moment, her phone lit up on the kitchen table with a notification. Mimi, hey, I can't make it tonight. I got a flat. Sorry. Jessica's legs felt as if they might give way at any moment. She needed to get back to the house without being spotted. Slowly, carefully, she took one shaky step back, then another and another, careful not to draw attention. Just a few more steps and she'd be home free. The sound of an approaching vehicle, its engine roaring, made her stop in her tracks. Perhaps it was morbid curiosity, but she just had to see once and for all what the things were. As the headlights neared, she saw something extraordinary. The two things seemed to dissolve in the oncoming lights. Stumbling back in disbelief, Julie realized they had just vanished into thin air. Panicked, she rushed up the wooden porch steps and stopped abruptly at the top. The front door was partially ajar and no light was on. Puzzled, she recalled leaving a lamp on and locking the door behind her, hadn't she? With a deep breath, Jessica pushed the door open, her palms sweaty with perspiration, and peered inside. The house was eerily quiet. The familiar scent of her mother's potpourri blend clung to the air. But it did little to comfort her. She slipped inside and slowly closed the door behind him, wincing at the creak of door hinges. Someone here? She called out, but her voice was cracking and raspy, and only silence answered. The absence of voices amplified every scrape and shuffle of her movements, and she felt the weight of the night pressing in on her. Instinct told her to grab the nearest lamp and flood every room with light, but she didn't want to alert the would-be perpetrator to her exact location. A rustling sound came from upstairs, and Jessica jumped with a start. That hadn't sounded like the house settling. Her gaze landed on the table, searching for her phone, but it was nowhere in sight. She grabbed a large kitchen knife and a small emergency flashlight from the closet, her thumb clicking on the flashlight switch, using it to guide her. The small light cut through the darkness as she inched her way up the stairs, her light scanning every shadowy corner. She wasn't sure what to look for, but she was almost sure it was probably something altogether bad. The clicking sounds from the road replayed in her mind, a reminder that something unnatural had been lurking outside moments earlier, and could now be hiding in the house. Suddenly she heard the creaking of a door opening upstairs, followed by a low, guttural growl. A wave of fear swept through her, and every instinct urged her to turn and run. But the rational part of her mind wanted to believe it was just a coyote that wandered in from outside. The woods surrounding their community were full of them. The door had been left unlocked. Either way, she had to know. Steeling herself, Jessica noiselessly made her way up the steps. She knew every inch of these stairs like the back of her hand. She felt for the light switch at the top of the stairs, flicking it on and off with her thumb, but no lights poured down from the ceiling lamps. Meandering her way down the dark corridor of bedroom doors, she held her flashlight in one hand and trembling blade in the other, ready to slash out at anything that moved. Just as she got halfway to her parents' room at the end of the hall, one of the floorboards groaned underneath the Navajo design rug. A bedroom door flew open behind her, and an arm was pressed against the front of her body like a steel bar. In the randomness of the moment she had dropped her flashlight-only weapon, they fell with dull thuds against the carpeted floor. A dark shape burst from the gloom of her parents' room. It was massive and feral, with glowing yellow eyes. Werewolf. A scream welled up in Jessica's throat, but it lodged there, unable to escape. Her captor held her in a merciless grip, a knife with a wicked edge aimed at the monstrous creature before them. Slowly they inched backward, Jessica a helpless human shield as they retreated toward the stairs. The werewolf advanced, its eyes glowing with a yellow predatory light. Jessica's hand scrabbled wildly over the wall, her fingers gripping the door. She clutched it with desperate strength. A sudden guttural snarl erupted from the stairs behind them, catching her attacker off guard. His grip faltered, loosening just enough for her to wrench free and stumble into the safety of a nearby room, slamming the door shut behind her. There was a loud scuffle outside the door, followed by a hard thud of something heavy hitting the floor, and an unnerving moment of silence lingered. Jessica's eyes scanned frantically, her mind racing. This was one of the guest rooms. A glint of silver from the bedside drawer drew her attention. She knew from legends that werewolves couldn't stand silver. She was across the room in a flash, yanking the drawer open. A silver letter opened and sat atop the jumble of paperwork and pens. With a surge of relief, Jessica grabbed the weapon. A growl came from the doorway. Whirling, she found the door opened, eyes narrowed at her. Feral snarls curled their lips. 2 large werewolves entered the room and closed in around her like a trapped animal. She scrambled onto the bed, holding the letter opener out at point range. She braced herself, her hand trembling. Okay, she could do this. They eyed her with instinctual curiosity for a heartbeat, their heads tilting in bewilderment. Frozen in place, her anxiety grew. Then, without warning, the lights flickered on, casting erratic shadows across the walls. Jessica. At that moment, the 2 figures standing before her were no longer the creatures from outside. Jess immediately recognized her mother's voice, though it sounded deeper, like she had a bad cold. "Mom? Is that you?" she asked, her voice uncertain. As the figures stepped closer, the familiar sight of her father melted the icy fear within her. Yet there was something different about his expression, something fractured and off-balance about them both. "Why didn't you stay home?" her mother asked, her voice brimming with concern. "You weren't supposed to be out this late." The door behind Jess creaked open again, the fear that had nearly vanished creeping back into her chest as she turned to see what lay beyond. It was the man who held her at knife point. Their neighbor, Stan, stood in the doorway, and he appeared alive and unscathed. "What's going on?" "What are you guys?" she asked, bewildered, the letter opener lowered to her lap. Standing at the foot of the bed, her parents gazed at her with a mixture of sympathy and admiration. Her mother came around to sit at the end of the bed, facing her. "We're sorry, sweetie. We know tonight must have been a harrowing experience for you. But this was a test. We had to make sure you were prepared. We had to know. And guess what? You passed, honey, with flying colors." While her dad was grinning, a tooth jutted out slightly over his bottom lip. Jessica's expression dropped slightly at the unsightly display. "Oh, oops." Her dad raised his thumb and pushed the tooth back in, looking slightly embarrassed. She gasped in exasperation, her thoughts racing, trying to piece things together. "Wait, let me get this straight. So the world is full of werewolves?" All 3 nodded in unison. "Then that was you guys outside on the road?" Again, they nodded in agreement. Except for me," Stan said. "I was already waiting in the house." He raised his blade in the air, then instantly lowered it, feeling regretful. "Sorry. Now it all makes sense." She dropped the letter opener and relaxed her posture on the bed. "That's why you guys are never home during a full moon." She reflected on all the times growing up when her parents would disappear for an entire night, at least once a month, leaving her in the care of her aunt. It was always when the moon was at its fullest. "We come from a long line of werewolves, Jessica," her dad replied. "It's passed down from generation to generation. But not everyone can become one of us," her mom intercepted. Stan cleared his throat and stepped into the room, placing his blade on the dresser. "To become a werewolf, a person has to prove their worthiness by demonstrating courage. We're so proud of you, dear." Her mom's eyes were on the verge of tears as she came to lovingly rest a hand on her shoulder. Jessica's heart dropped, realizing some nights held more than just adventure. They held secrets. And the party at Serpent River Bridge started to feel very far away as shadows danced at the edge of the world she once knew. me, 36 years old, female, and my daughter Olivia, 16 years old, female, live in a small town in South Dakota. She goes with her father every weekend. She leaves every Friday afternoon and comes back Sunday evenings, so usually she'll be gone by the time I get home from work on Friday evenings. This particular Friday, when I pulled up to our driveway, I looked up at her window and noticed her bedroom light was still on. I figured she accidentally left it on before leaving. IDK. I walk into the house and hear movement coming from upstairs. "Oh, she's still home," I whispered to myself. I went upstairs and knocked on her bedroom door and slowly opening it. "Your dad isn't picking you up this weekend?" I asked Number. I told him I want to stay. She said while looking down at her journal. "Great, I'll make dinner for us and we can watch a movie if you'd like." There was a long pause before she said, "Yes." I closed her door and I thought she was acting a bit standoffish. She usually has a lot to say. I texted her dad asking if they maybe got into some sort of disagreement or argument that led her to not wanting to go with him this weekend. I went downstairs and started making dinner for us as the food was cooking. I started organizing things around the house, and I noticed Olivia's book bag and coat aren't hung where we usually hang our things when we get home. I thought maybe she just took her things up to her room. No biggie. I went into the living room and saw Olivia sitting on the couch facing away from me. I didn't even hear her coming down the stairs. She kind of startled me, especially because she's just sitting there, not on her phone like usual and the TV off. I walk over to the kitchen and check on the food. I yell out if she can please pick out a movie for us. I went out to check what movie she picked, and to my surprise, the TV is still off and she's still sitting there motionless. "Olivia, you didn't hear me?" I said. I grabbed the remote and picked out a movie. I chose The Conjuring. I love Vera Farmiga. I grabbed our plates, and as I sat down on the couch, I heard a notification coming from my phone in the kitchen. I told her he'll be right back. I checked my phone, and it was a text from her father. After reading his message, my body went cold and stiff, literal chills. He said, "What do you mean?" "I picked Olivia up from school and we're grabbing dinner with her grandma right now." I feel catatonic at this point. I took a deep breath and walked slowly towards the living room, peeking in to see if it was still sitting on the couch. It was. It was just sitting there very still, looking forward but away from me. I haven't even seen Olivia's face since I've been home. Like the thing has purposely been avoiding eye contact. I went back into the kitchen. I didn't know what to do. I'm fucking terrified. I had to go back out there. My car keys are in the living room. I took a deep breath and got the courage to walk out confidently like everything was normal. It was gone. I don't know why I yelled out, "Olivia?" My stupid, confused human instincts. I heard its voice coming from upstairs, sounding just like my Olivia. It said, "Mom, I'm upstairs. I need your help." In the most sinister voice. Hell no. I grabbed my keys and ran the fuck out the house. I was shaking so much I couldn't even put the damn keys in the ignition. God, I wish I had a push start for this very moment. As I reversed out my driveway, I looked up at the house and it was at Olivia's window waving at me, faceless. I couldn't even breathe. I never drove off so fast in my life. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to cheat. In fact, I always prided myself on my loyalty and integrity. But life has a funny way of testing our principles, and sometimes we fail those tests in ways we never imagined. It all started about a year ago. My partner and I had been together for 5 years, living together for 3. Things were good, or at least I thought they were. We had our routines, our shared jokes, our future plans. But somewhere along the way, the spark had started to fade. We were both busy with our careers, and the time we spent together felt more like going through the motions than genuine connection. Enter Alex. Alex was a new colleague at work, vibrant and full of energy. We hit it off immediately, bonding over shared interests and long conversations during lunch breaks. At first, it was innocent. I enjoyed the attention and the way Alex made me feel. Seen, valued, excited. It was a stark contrast to the mundane reality of my relationship at home. One night, after a particularly stressful day, Alex and I went out for drinks. One drink turned into several, and before I knew it, we were laughing and sharing secrets in a dimly lit corner of a bar. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. When Alex leaned in and kissed me, I didn't pull away. It felt like something I deserved, a break from the monotony, a reminder that I was still desirable. That kiss led to more, and before I knew it, We were in Alex's apartment, tangled in sheets and each other. In the moment, I wasn't thinking about my partner or the consequences. I was caught up in the thrill, the rush of something new and forbidden. The next morning, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. I was consumed with guilt and shame. I knew I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I went home, avoiding my partner's eyes, and spent the day in a fog of self-loathing. For weeks, I lived a double life. At home, I tried to act normal, but the weight of my secret was suffocating. At work, things with Alex continued, each encounter pulling me deeper into a web of deceit. I told myself it was just a phase, that it would end soon, but it didn't. Eventually, the lies caught up with me. My partner found a message on my phone, and there was no way to explain it away. The confrontation was brutal, filled with anger, betrayal, and tears. Seeing the hurt in my partner's eyes was like a knife to the heart. I had destroyed the trust we had built over years in a matter of months. We tried to salvage our relationship, going to therapy and having countless painful conversations. But the damage was done. The trust was shattered, and no matter how much we tried to repair it, things were never the same. Eventually, we decided to go our separate ways. Looking back, I can see how I let myself fall into the trap of infidelity. I was unhappy and looking for something to fill the void. But instead of addressing the issues in my relationship or working on myself, I took the easy way out, seeking validation and excitement in someone else. Cheating isn't just a mistake, it's a choice, one that comes with devastating consequences. I've learned that the hard way. Now I'm trying to pick up the pieces and move forward, hoping that one day I can forgive myself and be a better person in my future relationships. So that's my story. It's not one I'm proud of, but it's a part of my journey. If you've been through something similar, know that you're not alone. We all make mistakes, and all we can do is learn from them and strive to do better.